There are discoveries that don't feel like answers. They feel like interruptions, moments where history doesn't continue, it breaks. Patterns appear where they shouldn't. Precision shows up where it's not expected. And the more closely we examine these traces, the less they behave like isolated achievements, and the more they resemble something connected. Not by geography, not by time, but by intent. It's as if these remnants were never meant to stand alone, but to form something larger we can no longer see. And that leads to a deeply unsettling thought. What if the past isn't incomplete because it was lost, but because we're only seeing the parts we're meant to find? The Rano Raraku quarry on Easter Island is one of the most extraordinary archaeological landscapes on Earth. A vast volcanic crater that served as the primary production site for the island's iconic Moai statues. Scattered across the slopes of this extinct volcano are hundreds of massive stone figures in every stage of creation, forming what can only be described as an ancient industrial workshop carved directly into the mountainside. Archaeologists estimate that nearly 95% of all Moai statues ever erected across the island originated here, meaning that this single quarry functioned as the birthplace of a monumental tradition that defined the entire civilization of the Rapa Nui people. Today, almost 400 statues remain frozen in the quarry itself, some fully carved but never removed, others half buried in sediment, and many still attached to the bedrock from which they were originally shaped. The site provides a rare glimpse into the step-by-step process used by ancient craftsmen, yet at the same time, it raises profound technological questions that modern science still struggles to answer. The statues were carved from compressed volcanic ash, known as tuff, a relatively soft rock, but still challenging to shape, using only primitive stone tools. Rapa Nui artisans began by outlining the front of the statue directly on the sloping surface of the volcano, gradually chiseling away material until the elongated face, torso, and arms emerged from the rock itself. Only after the front and sides were complete would workers cut beneath the statue's back, detaching it from the mother rock and allowing it to slide down the quarry slope. Yet once standing upright, the final details on the back would be finished. This method required careful planning, extraordinary spatial awareness, and remarkable control over large stone masses. Even more impressive is the consistency of the statue's proportions. Despite being carved by hand with basalt tools, the Moai share an almost standardized appearance. Elongated heads, prominent brows, straight noses, and folded arms resting against the torso. Many stand between 4 and 10 meters tall, with some reaching heights far greater than that. The largest known statue in the quarry, often referred to as El Gigante, would have stood over 20 meters tall and weighed close to 200 tons if it had ever been completed. Its immense scale suggests that the Rapa Nui were experimenting with increasingly ambitious designs and pushing the limits of their stoneworking abilities. Yet El Gigante was never finished, and its enormous unfinished form remains embedded in the rock, hinting at an engineering project that may have exceeded the technological or logistical capabilities of its creators. Across the slopes of Rano Raraku, statues lie in every conceivable position, some partially buried upright, others leaning against the hillside, and many abandoned mid-carving. Their presence creates an eerie impression of a workshop suddenly frozen in time, as if the workers simply stopped and never returned. Why this happened remains one of the enduring mysteries of Easter Island. Some researchers suggest ecological collapse, others propose social upheaval or shifts in religious beliefs. But none of these explanations fully account for the sudden halt in quarry activity. Another striking feature of the quarry is the so-called buried Moai. For centuries, travelers believed many statues consisted only of heads protruding from the soil, but modern excavations have revealed that these figures possess full bodies, extending several meters underground. Over time, erosion and sediment flowing down the volcano gradually buried them, leaving only the upper portions visible. Some of these statues are more than 7 meters tall when fully uncovered, demonstrating the monumental scale of the project undertaken by the Rapa Nui people. Yet the most perplexing mystery of Rano Raraku is not how the statues were carved, but how they were transported once finished. After being detached from the quarry rock, the Moai had to be moved across the island to ceremonial platforms known as ahu, sometimes over distances of more than 20 kilometers. Many statues weighed between 10 and 80 tons, and a few exceeded 100 tons. The island's rugged terrain, combined with the absence of large draft animals or advanced machinery, makes the logistics of this operation extraordinarily difficult to comprehend. Early European observers proposed that the statues must have been dragged on wooden sledges using logs as rollers, but this theory faces a major problem. By the time Europeans arrived in the 18th century, Easter Island was almost entirely deforested, and evidence suggests that large forests had already disappeared centuries earlier. Without sufficient timber, moving dozens of enormous stone figures would have been nearly impossible using traditional sledging methods. Another theory proposes that the statues were transported upright and walked across the landscape using ropes, with teams of workers rocking them from side to side in a carefully controlled motion. Experimental archaeologists have demonstrated that such a method can indeed move replicas of Moai statues, giving rise to the famous idea that the statues walked to their destinations, echoing oral traditions preserved among the Rapa Nui themselves. However, even this explanation does not fully resolve the mystery. The largest statues may have been too heavy for this technique, and the precise routes used to transport them across the island remain uncertain. In fact, dozens of Moai still lie along ancient roads radiating outward from Rano Raraku, as if they collapsed during transport and were never recovered. These fallen giants provide tantalizing clues, but no definitive answers. The question of transportation remains the single greatest technological puzzle surrounding the Moai culture. How did a relatively small Polynesian society organize the labor, engineering knowledge, and resources necessary to move hundreds of massive stone monuments across such challenging terrain? Were there specialized techniques now lost to history, or social structures capable of mobilizing enormous cooperative efforts? The quarry at Rano Raraku stands as silent evidence of a sophisticated and highly organized society capable of undertaking one of the most ambitious stoneworking projects in human history. Yet despite decades of archaeological study, many aspects of this achievement remain unresolved. The statues still watch over the quarry slopes as they have for centuries, their unfinished forms and abandoned positions preserving the moment when one of the world's most mysterious monumental traditions suddenly came to an end. And above all, the greatest enigma endures. Once these colossal figures were carved from the volcanic rock of Rano Raraku, by what remarkable method did the ancient people of Easter Island manage to move them across the island and raise them upon their distant ceremonial platforms? How do you think the ancient Rapa Nui managed to move the massive Moai statues, weighing dozens of tons, out of the Rano Raraku quarry? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. The Leshan cliff carving megastructure in Sichuan province, China, stands as one of the most astonishing achievements of ancient rock-cut engineering. Carved directly into the red sandstone cliffs of Mount Lingyun at the dramatic confluence of the Minjiang, Dadu, and Qingyi rivers, this immense monument is best known for the Leshan giant Buddha, a colossal seated statue rising approximately 71 meters high. Construction began in the early 8th century, during the Tang dynasty, under the guidance of a Buddhist monk named Haitong, who believed that a great sacred statue overlooking the turbulent rivers would calm the dangerous waters that had long threatened boats passing through the gorge. The project ultimately took nearly 90 years to complete, spanning generations of artisans and laborers. Yet even today, more than 12 centuries later, the Leshan cliff carving continues to perplex archaeologists, engineers, and historians, not merely because of its monumental scale, but because of the sophisticated technical decisions hidden within the stone itself. Unlike many ancient statues that were assembled from carved blocks, the Leshan Buddha was sculpted directly from the living rock of the cliff face. This required artisans to remove vast quantities of stone, while simultaneously shaping a perfectly balanced human figure, whose proportions would only appear correct when viewed from the river far below. The head alone rises nearly 15 meters, the shoulders stretch almost 28 meters across, and the ears extend roughly 7 meters in length. And while the enormous feet rest on a platform overlooking the water where boats once passed beneath the statue's gaze. Achieving such harmony at this scale demanded an extraordinary understanding of geometry, perspective, and proportional design. Any miscalculation during carving would have permanently distorted the figure, since mistakes could not simply be replaced or corrected once the stone had been removed. The artisans therefore had to work with exceptional precision while standing on temporary structures, clinging to the cliff wall, carefully shaping the mountain itself into a serene, human form. Another remarkable feature of the monument lies hidden within the statue's interior. Archaeological surveys have revealed an intricate drainage system carved into the stone that channels rainwater away from vulnerable surfaces. Narrow channels run through the statue's hair, collar, arms, and folds of the robe, quietly guiding water through concealed passages before releasing it outside the structure. This sophisticated system prevents erosion and has likely played a crucial role in preserving the statue for over a millennium in the humid climate of Sichuan. What makes this discovery even more impressive is that these drainage channels were integrated into the sculpture itself during construction, meaning the designers had to anticipate centuries of rainfall and water flow long before the statue was completed. The engineering foresight required to embed such a system within a massive cliff sculpture suggests that the builders possessed a practical understanding of hydrology and long-term stone preservation. Beyond the drainage network, the logistics of carving such a monument also remain a subject of debate. Thousands of tons of stone had to be removed from the cliff face during the sculpting process. Historical accounts suggest that much of this rock may have been dropped directly into the river below, which gradually altered the current, and may indeed have reduced the violent turbulence that originally endangered passing boats. If this account is accurate, the construction of the Buddha may have simultaneously served both a spiritual and a practical engineering purpose, subtly reshaping the river environment while creating a sacred monument. Yet perhaps the most visually intricate part of the statue lies in the head. The Buddha's hair consists of more than 1,000 carefully carved spiral curls, each individually shaped yet arranged to produce a perfectly rounded cranial surface when viewed from a distance. The precision required to distribute these elements evenly across such a massive curved surface hints at a sophisticated design plan guiding the entire sculpture. The precision required to distribute these elements evenly across such a massive curved surface hints at a sophisticated design plan guiding the entire sculpture. Each curl of hair, though individually carved, forms part of a perfectly balanced pattern that contributes to the overall geometry of the statue's head. This level of control over form and symmetry suggests that the artisans were not merely improvising as they carved, but were following a highly organized construction strategy. While maintaining symmetry across such an enormous figure carved into uneven natural rock would have required careful measurement and continuous verification throughout the process. Even slight deviations in alignment could have ruined the aesthetic harmony of the statue. The ability to maintain proportional balance over such a vast vertical surface remains one of the most impressive technical aspects of the Leshan cliff carving. Despite these impressive technical achievements, the greatest mystery surrounding the Leshan cliff carving megastructure concerns a question that modern researchers still struggle to answer. How was the complete design of the statue planned before the carving began? Unlike modern construction projects, the Tang-era builders did not possess modern surveying equipment, laser measurement systems, and/or detailed architectural blueprints preserved for us to study today. Yet the statue's proportions remain remarkably accurate from top to bottom, suggesting that its creators followed a carefully calculated master plan long before the first blows of the chisel struck the rock. When carving a sculpture directly into a cliff, the process typically begins at the top and gradually moves downward. This method means that any error in proportion early in the process would propagate throughout the entire structure, making later corrections nearly impossible. If the head were carved slightly too large, the entire body below would have to be distorted to compensate. If the shoulders were misplaced, the symmetry of the entire statue would collapse. In other words, the artisans had only one opportunity to shape the monument correctly. This raises the possibility that the builders used a sophisticated scaling system to translate a smaller design into the enormous dimensions of the cliff. Some researchers believe that a miniature clay or wooden model may have been created first, with its proportions carefully transferred to the rock using measurement grids or reference points marked across the cliff face. Others speculate that networks of ropes, plumb lines, and wooden frames might have been used to maintain correct alignment while artisans carved each section. However, despite decades of archaeological investigation, no definitive physical evidence of these planning systems has yet been discovered. The absence of clear design records leaves scholars with only indirect clues, and yet the finished monument itself suggests that some form of advanced spatial planning must have existed. The Leshan Buddha, therefore, represents more than just a religious sculpture. It is a monumental puzzle in stone that reflects the engineering intelligence of an ancient civilization. Every aspect of the structure, from its balanced proportions and integrated drainage system to the precise placement of its enormous features, suggests that the builders possessed a level of technical planning far more sophisticated than we often attribute to early medieval construction. Standing silently above the rivers of Sichuan for more than 1,200 years, the Leshan cliff carving megastructure continues to challenge our understanding of ancient engineering, but leaving modern observers with a lingering question carved as deeply into the cliffs as the statue itself. How did the designers of this colossal monument envision and execute such a perfectly scaled masterpiece before the first fragment of stone was ever removed? In your opinion, how could ancient engineers and artisans design the entire colossal statue so precisely before they even began carving into the cliff. Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. The Baekje Neungsanri Temple Mega-Complex in Buyo, South Korea, is one of the most fascinating archaeological sites connected to the ancient kingdom of Baekje, a powerful state that thrived on the Korean peninsula from the 1st century BCE to the 7th century CE. Built near the royal tombs of Neungsanri during the final centuries of the kingdom, the temple likely served an important ceremonial role linked to royal authority and spiritual beliefs about the afterlife. Although the ruins may appear modest compared to other Asian monuments, archaeological studies reveal remarkable architectural planning and technical sophistication. Beneath what seems to be a typical Buddhist temple complex lies evidence of advanced knowledge in urban design, structural engineering, water management, and metal craftsmanship, raising enduring questions about how such technologies were achieved with the tools available at the time. Excavations carried out in the 20th century revealed that the Neungsanri temple was constructed along an extremely precise ceremonial axis. The layout followed a strict linear alignment in which a main gate led directly to a central pagoda, followed by the main worship hall and surrounding corridors. This axial design was not simply symbolic. It was implemented with remarkable geometric accuracy. Even though the complex stretches across a considerable area, the structures appear almost perfectly aligned along a north-south orientation. Achieving such alignment would normally require careful measurement, astronomical observation, or surveying techniques, and yet no clear evidence has been found indicating exactly how Baekje engineers carried out such precise planning. The builders appear to have understood how to position structures with minimal deviation over long distances, suggesting knowledge of spatial geometry and surveying principles that are not fully documented in surviving historical records. The mystery deepens when considering that the terrain in this region is uneven and prone to seasonal moisture, factors that complicate accurate construction. Nevertheless, the temple complex was laid out with a level of order that implies systematic planning rather than improvisation. Equally impressive is the engineering hidden beneath the temple foundations. The archaeologists discovered that the ground supporting the buildings was carefully prepared, using multiple layers of materials, including stones, gravel, compacted soil, and sand. This layered structure appears to have functioned as a primitive yet highly effective anti-subsidence system. The arrangement distributed weight evenly while allowing water to drain away from the structures, preventing the soil from weakening over time. Such methods resemble principles used in modern civil engineering to stabilize foundations and reduce the risk of collapse. Yet there is little evidence of the tools that would have been necessary to compact the layers so evenly or transport the heavy materials involved. The precision with which the stones were placed suggests a clear understanding of structural balance and load distribution. Yes, rather than simply stacking materials, the builders created a system designed to endure environmental stress for generations. Closely related to this foundation system is the sophisticated network of drainage channels uncovered beneath the complex. The temple was built with stone-lined channels and carefully sloped pathways designed to direct rainwater away from the buildings. These channels form an integrated hydraulic system that prevented flooding during seasonal storms and protected the foundation layers from erosion. What astonished researchers is the accuracy of the slopes. The channels descend at gradients that allow water to flow smoothly without stagnation or destructive turbulence. Even slight miscalculations in slope could have caused pooling or erosion, Yet the drainage system appears to have functioned efficiently for centuries. How Baekje builders measured and calculated these gradients without modern surveying instruments remains unclear. Some scholars suggest that they relied on empirical experimentation combined with observational knowledge of landscape and rainfall patterns, but definitive proof of their methods has yet to be discovered. However, the most extraordinary discovery connected to the Neungsanri temple site is not architectural, but an artistic and technological achievement: the famous Baekje gilt bronze incense burner. Unearthed during archaeological excavations in the 1990s, this artifact is widely regarded as one of the greatest masterpieces of ancient metal craftsmanship in East Asia. The incense burner is far more than a ritual object. It is a stunning demonstration of technical mastery and symbolic complexity. The body of the burner rises from a lotus-shaped base, while the lid above is sculpted into a miniature mountain landscape filled with numerous animals, mythological creatures, and human figures. At the summit of this fantastical scene stands a phoenix, while dragons coil along the sides and countless tiny details cover the entire surface. Altogether, the artifact contains dozens of individual figures intricately integrated into a single structure, each rendered with remarkable precision. The entire piece recreates a three-dimensional cosmic world, representing sacred mountains, spiritual realms, and mythical beings connected to Buddhist beliefs and regional traditions. What makes this incense burner particularly mysterious is the extraordinary level of technical skill required to produce it. The object was cast in bronze and then gilded, yet the complexity of its design suggests an extremely sophisticated casting process. Many of the details are incredibly delicate, with thin protrusions and hollow spaces that would have been difficult to achieve without advanced mold-making techniques. Scholars have debated whether the artisans used the lost wax casting method or a system of multiple molds assembled to produce a single casting. Either approach would have required extremely precise control of molten metal temperature as well as careful cooling management to avoid structural defects. Considering the limited furnaces and tools available during the Baekje period, the ability to create such a flawless object is astonishing. Even more puzzling is how the craftsman designed the piece so that dozens of intricate elements could be cast together without collapsing or deforming. Metallurgical analysis shows that the bronze alloy used in the incense burner was carefully balanced to improve both strength and fluidity during casting. This indicates that Baekje metalworkers possessed a deep empirical understanding of alloy chemistry. Achieving such balance without modern scientific instruments would likely have required generations of experimentation and accumulated craft knowledge. The gilding process adds another layer of complexity. The gold coating adheres evenly across the elaborate surface, suggesting a sophisticated method for bonding precious metal to bronze. And exactly how this process was carried out remains uncertain, though it likely involved controlled heating and specialized surface preparation. Beyond its technical brilliance, the incense burner also raises broader questions about the intellectual world of Baekje artisans. The imagery on the lid depicts a cosmological landscape that blends Buddhist symbolism with indigenous mythology. Mountains, animals, and mythical beings are arranged in a carefully structured hierarchy that may represent the spiritual universe as understood in Baekje culture. The integration of artistic symbolism with metallurgical mastery suggests that the object was not merely decorative, but served as a ritual device embodying complex philosophical ideas. Such a synthesis of engineering and cosmology is rare even among advanced civilizations of the same era, and the discovery of the Baekje gilt bronze incense burner greatly changed scholars' understanding of technology in the ancient kingdom of Baekje. Before its excavation, many historians believed Baekje craftsmanship mainly followed influences from neighboring cultures. However, the remarkable precision and complexity of this artifact revealed that Baekje artisans possessed metallurgical skills that rivaled or even surpassed those of many contemporary societies. Even after decades of research, the exact techniques used to create the incense burner remain only partially understood. When viewed alongside the precise layout of the temple complex, its advanced foundation engineering, and its carefully designed drainage system, the incense burner reflects a civilization with highly refined technical knowledge. The Baekje Neungsanri temple megacomplex was not only a religious site, but also a place where engineering, art, and spiritual symbolism came together in extraordinary ways. However, the site still leaves many unanswered questions. The kingdom of Baekje collapsed in the year 660 CE after being defeated by the allied forces of Silla and the Tang dynasty, and much of its technological knowledge may have disappeared along with that event. Historical records that survived are extremely limited, and many construction and metallurgical techniques were likely passed down orally through artisan guilds, traditions that vanished when the kingdom itself fell. As a result, modern researchers can observe the extraordinary achievements of Baekje craftsmanship, but still cannot fully reconstruct the methods behind them. Today, the ruins of the temple and the famous Baekje gilt bronze incense burner, preserved in museums, stand as reminders of a civilization whose technology was remarkably advanced, yet only partially understood. Even after centuries of research, the Neungsanri temple complex still raises a compelling question. How did the craftsmen of Baekje achieve such mastery? And how much knowledge disappeared forever with the fall of their kingdom? In your opinion, how did the ancient Baekje craftsmen manage to achieve such extraordinary techniques, and how many of their technological secrets might have been lost forever with the fall of their kingdom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Carnac stones, located in the coastal region of Brittany in northwestern France, represent one of the most extraordinary and mysterious prehistoric engineering achievements ever discovered. Stretching across the countryside for nearly 4 kilometers, this immense complex consists of more than 3,000 standing stones, known as menhirs, arranged in long, remarkably ordered rows that extend across fields, hills, and gentle slopes. Archaeologists believe the site was constructed during the Neolithic period, roughly between 4,500 and 3,300 BCE, thousands of years before many of the world's most famous ancient monuments, including the pyramids of Egypt. Despite more than a century of archaeological investigation, many aspects of the Carnac megalith alignments remain deeply puzzling, and particularly the engineering methods used to construct them and the precise reason why such an immense project was undertaken by a prehistoric society. At first glance, the sheer scale of Carnac is astonishing. The stones are grouped into several major alignments, including the Menek, Camario, and Kaleskin rows, each containing hundreds or even thousands of upright stones placed in long parallel lines. Some stones stand only about 1 meter tall, while others rise more than 6 meters above the ground and weigh many tons. In total, the site forms the largest known concentration of megalithic standing stones anywhere in the world. Constructing such an enormous monument would have required not only tremendous physical labor, but also a highly organized society capable of coordinating large groups of workers and planning complex construction phases and maintaining a consistent architectural vision over what may have been generations of building activity. For a society that existed long before written records, metal tools, or advanced machinery, The ability to execute a project of this scale raises profound questions about the technological and social capabilities of Neolithic communities. One of the earliest mysteries concerns the transportation and erection of the stones themselves. The granite blocks used in the alignments were quarried locally, yet even short-distance transport would have been a formidable challenge. Many of the stones weigh between 5 and 40 tons, and moving them across uneven terrain without wheels, metal tools, or animals capable of heavy hauling would have required ingenious methods. Some researchers believe the builders used wooden rollers, sledges, ropes made from plant fibers, and carefully constructed earthen ramps. Others suggest the stones may have been dragged across wet clay or lubricated surfaces to reduce friction. However, no definitive archaeological evidence has confirmed exactly how the stones were moved or raised into position. Even more puzzling is how the builders managed to stabilize each massive monolith so that it could stand upright for thousands of years, resisting wind, erosion, and geological changes. Yet perhaps the most astonishing and technically mysterious feature of Carnac is the extraordinary precision with which the stones are aligned. When viewed from the ground, the site appears as a series of long rows fading into the distance. But when seen from above, through aerial photography or drone imagery, the true geometric complexity of the alignments becomes clear. Hundreds upon hundreds of stones form nearly perfectly straight lines extending across the landscape, with consistent spacing and orientation maintained over distances that stretch for kilometers. The rows gradually converge and diverge in subtle patterns, creating enormous geometric formations that would have been extremely difficult to plan without a clear system of surveying or measurement. This remarkable accuracy has led many researchers to wonder how Neolithic builders, working without modern instruments, could maintain such precise linear alignments over such vast distances. Maintaining a straight line over even a few hundred meters can be challenging without modern surveying tools. Yet the builders of Carnac appear to have achieved this repeatedly across the landscape. Some archaeologists propose that the ancient engineers may have used wooden stakes, stretched cords, and visual sightlines to establish reference axes across the terrain. Others speculate that natural landmarks, such as distant hills, celestial markers, or the rising and setting points of the sun, may have served as alignment guides. There are even suggestions that the builders might have employed rudimentary geometric planning methods passed down through generations of tradition. However, none of these theories fully explains the consistency observed across thousands of stones arranged in multiple parallel rows. The fact that these alignments remain visible and coherent even today, after more than 6 millennia, and suggests that the original builders possessed a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of spatial planning and large-scale landscape design. The precise orientation of many of the rows has also led researchers to explore the possibility that Carnac served an astronomical purpose. Some scholars have argued that certain alignments may correspond with solar events such as the summer solstice or winter solstice, while others believe the stones might track lunar cycles or other celestial patterns important to prehistoric societies. If this interpretation is correct, the Carnac alignments could represent a vast prehistoric observatory or ceremonial landscape designed to encode knowledge of the heavens within the structure of the Earth itself. No similar interpretations have been proposed for other megalithic sites such as Stonehenge in the United Kingdom, suggesting that ancient communities across Europe may have shared sophisticated traditions of sky observation and ritual landscape design. However, the astronomical hypothesis remains debated, as not all rows correspond neatly with known celestial events. Another mystery surrounding Carnac is the absence of clear evidence explaining its cultural purpose. Unlike many later ancient monuments, the site contains very few carvings, inscriptions, or artifacts that reveal why the stones were erected. Some archaeologists believe the alignments may have been part of a vast ceremonial landscape used for religious rituals or seasonal gatherings. Others suggest the rows could represent symbolic pathways or processional routes used during ancient ceremonies. A different theory proposes that the stones marked territorial boundaries or served as monuments commemorating ancestors or important historical events. Because the stones themselves contain no written clues, the true meaning of the alignments remains open to interpretation. What makes the Carnac megalith alignments so fascinating is that they are far more than a simple collection of ancient stones. Thousands of massive menhirs were quarried, transported, and arranged with striking geometric precision across a vast landscape by a society that left no written explanation of its intentions. The accuracy of these alignments suggests a level of planning and engineering that challenges traditional assumptions about the technological abilities of Neolithic communities. More than 6,000 years later, Carnac still raises profound questions. How were prehistoric builders able to organize such an enormous construction effort? What techniques allowed them to maintain such precise alignments across kilometers of terrain? And what meaning did these stones hold for the people who built them? Until these mysteries are solved, Carnac remains one of the most intriguing archaeological enigmas on Earth. In your opinion, how were Neolithic builders able to align thousands of massive stones into nearly perfect straight lines across several kilometers of landscape? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden within the rugged basalt cliffs of the Western Ghats in Maharashtra, India, the Kondana Buddhist cave megacomplex stands as one of the most intriguing examples of ancient rock-cut architecture in South Asia. Dating back to around the 2nd century BCE, this relatively lesser-known monastic complex lies near the ancient trade routes that once connected coastal ports with the interior of the Indian subcontinent. At first glance, Kondana may appear modest compared with monumental cave systems such as Ajanta caves or Ellora caves, yet archaeologists and architectural historians increasingly view it as an important window into the technological capabilities of early Buddhist builders. The caves were not constructed by stacking stone blocks or assembling architectural components in stages. Instead, they were carved directly into a single massive basalt cliff, a process that demanded extraordinary planning and precision. Every pillar, wall, corridor, and chamber had to be imagined and executed by removing rock rather than adding it. Once a section of stone was removed incorrectly, there was no way to replace it. Despite this inherent risk, the surviving caves display an impressive level of structural order and symmetry, suggesting that the ancient builders possessed a highly developed understanding of spatial geometry, construction sequencing, and rock mechanics. The most remarkable feature of Kondana, however, lies in the astonishing precision with which its interior spaces were carved from extremely hard basalt rock, a material that even modern engineers consider difficult to cut without advanced tools. Thus, basalt forms through the cooling of volcanic lava and is known for its density and hardness. Today, shaping such rock often requires diamond-tipped tools or powerful mechanical cutters. Yet more than 2,000 years ago, the craftsmen responsible for Kondana appear to have achieved remarkably smooth surfaces, straight lines, and carefully proportioned architectural forms using only iron chisels, hammerstones, and patient manual labor. Inside the caves, the walls appear surprisingly even, while the pillars retain clean edges and consistent proportions, indicating that the artisans maintain tight control over the carving process. Some surfaces show patterns of chisel marks that are strikingly regular, almost as if the workers followed standardized carving rhythms or measurement systems. This consistency has puzzled many researchers, because the technology available at the time would have made such precision extremely difficult to maintain across large surfaces. The question therefore arises, how did ancient craftsmen achieve such controlled and uniform cuts in basalt without modern equipment? Some scholars propose that the builders relied on carefully organized teams of specialists, each trained to follow specific carving techniques. Others suggest that early measurement systems, possibly involving cords, plumb lines, or wooden templates, allowed them to maintain alignment and symmetry as they excavated deeper into the cliff. Still, these explanations only partially account for the extraordinary uniformity visible in the finished spaces. The main cave at Kondana is a chaitya hall, an early Buddhist prayer chamber designed to house a stupa at its far end. Yet the hall features a long central nave, flanked by rows of rock-cut pillars that create side aisles, guiding visitors toward the sacred structure. What is particularly fascinating about this design is that it appears to replicate the form of earlier wooden buildings. The curved, vaulted ceiling resembles the ribbed roofs of ancient timber halls, yet here the entire structure has been sculpted from solid rock. This transformation of wooden architectural traditions into stone suggests that the designers possessed a deep understanding of both structural stability and aesthetic continuity. The pillars are spaced with surprising regularity, forming a rhythm that leads the eye through the chamber, while the ceiling's gentle curve distributes the weight of the overlying rock across the supporting columns. Achieving such a layout required the builders to plan the entire structure before excavation began, because each pillar had to be left intact as surrounding stone was removed. Any miscalculation could have compromised the stability of the entire hall. Another remarkable aspect of the Kondana complex is the subtle system of water management integrated into the rock surfaces. The caves are located in a region that experiences intense monsoon rainfall, yet the interior spaces have remained relatively stable over centuries. Archaeologists have identified shallow grooves and channels carved around entrances and along rock faces that appear to guide rainwater away from the cave interiors. Floors are often slightly sloped so that water drains naturally toward the exterior. Such features indicate that the ancient builders not only mastered the art of carving stone, but also understood the environmental challenges posed by their mountainous setting. They appear to have integrated hydrological awareness into the design, preventing erosion and water accumulation that might otherwise have damaged the complex over time. The construction of Kondana also implies a sophisticated level of organization and labor coordination. Carving even a single chamber in basalt would have required months or years of continuous effort. Creating an entire complex with multiple cells, corridors, and a large prayer hall would likely have involved a sizable workforce operating under careful supervision. And yet the archaeological record contains surprisingly little evidence of large permanent settlements associated with the builders. This absence has led some historians to propose that Kondana was part of a broader network of Buddhist monastic sites built along trade routes, where craftsmen and monks may have traveled from site to site as patronage and resources became available. In this sense, Kondana may represent one node within a larger tradition of rock-cut architecture that flourished across Western India during the early centuries of Buddhism. Comparisons with nearby cave complexes such as Kala Caves, Baja Caves, and Betsy Caves, reveal striking stylistic similarities, particularly in the design of chicha halls and the use of rock-cut columns. Yet Kondana retains a distinctive character of its own, and partly because certain areas appear unfinished. These incomplete sections offer rare clues into the carving process, exposing the stages by which ancient workers gradually hollowed out the interior from the cliff face. Even in these unfinished areas, the chisel patterns remain surprisingly orderly, reinforcing the impression that the builders followed precise and disciplined techniques. Ultimately, the Kondana Buddhist cave mega-complex represents far more than a simple religious sanctuary. It stands as a testament to the ingenuity of ancient engineers who, despite limited technology, achieved remarkable results. The precise carving of extremely hard basalt remains one of the site's greatest mysteries. Through skill, organized labor, and deep knowledge of stone, the builders transformed a volcanic cliff into a carefully designed spiritual space. Even after more than 2 millennia, the caves still preserve the marks of ancient tools, reminding researchers that much of the technological knowledge of past civilizations may have been lost to time. How do you think ancient craftsmen were able to carve such precise spaces into extremely hard basalt rock at Kondana Caves more than 2,000 years ago, using only very simple tools? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. Rising above the modern city of Athens, the monumental complex known as the Acropolis of Athens stands atop a steep limestone hill more than 150 meters above sea level. For over 2,400 years, this hilltop sanctuary has dominated the skyline, crowned by marble temples that symbolize the peak of classical Greek civilization. Yet beyond its artistic beauty, the Acropolis represents something far more profound, a massive engineering achievement whose construction still raises difficult questions for modern archaeologists and engineers. Built largely during the 5th century BCE, under the leadership of the Athenian statesman Pericles, the complex was designed as both a religious center dedicated to the goddess Athena and a statement of political power following the Greek victories over Persia. The most famous structure within the complex is the Parthenon, a colossal marble temple constructed from thousands of carefully carved blocks of Pentelic marble. Even today, the Parthenon astonishes architects because almost nothing in the structure is perfectly straight. The floor subtly curves upward toward the center, the columns lean slightly inward, and the corner columns are thicker than the others. These adjustments were not mistakes, but deliberate optical corrections designed to counteract distortions in human perception. Without advanced measuring instruments or digital modeling tools, ancient Greek architects such as Ictinus and Callicrates managed to create a building whose geometry appears perfectly balanced to the human eye, demonstrating an extraordinary understanding of mathematics, optics, and structural design. Yet perhaps even more remarkable than the geometry of the buildings is the precision of the stonework itself. The temples of the Acropolis were constructed from enormous blocks of marble quarried from Mount Pentelicus, located roughly 16 kilometers away from the site. Each block was cut with astonishing accuracy, polished smooth, and fitted together so tightly that the joints between stones are barely visible even today. Instead of mortar, the Greeks used carefully carved connections and metal clamps, often iron bars sealed in protective lead, to bind the stones together while allowing a small degree of flexibility during earthquakes. This combination of precision carving and flexible fastening created structures capable of surviving centuries of natural disasters. However, at one of the greatest unsolved engineering puzzles surrounding the Acropolis is not how the stones were carved or fitted, but how they were transported to the top of the hill in the first place. The Acropolis is not a gentle rise in the landscape. It is a steep and rugged rock formation with sheer cliffs and uneven slopes. Many of the marble blocks used in the construction of the temples weighed several tons, and some structural elements were even heavier. Moving such massive stones across 16 kilometers of terrain would already have been an enormous logistical challenge. Raising them another 150 meters up a rocky hill would have been even more difficult. Archaeologists believe that ancient builders may have used wooden sledges, rollers, and systems of ropes to drag the blocks across the landscape, but the final ascent up the Acropolis hill remains particularly mysterious. Some scholars suggest that large earthen ramps may have been constructed temporarily to allow workers and animals to haul the stones upward. Others propose that early crane systems, powered by pulleys and human labor, were used to lift and position the blocks once they reached the top. Evidence for ancient cranes has been found in other Greek construction sites, including holes drilled into stone blocks that appear to have been used for lifting devices. However, the exact scale and organization of such machinery at the Acropolis remain uncertain. The challenge becomes even more extraordinary when considering the sheer volume of material involved. Thousands of tons of marble were transported, shaped, and placed with remarkable accuracy, and all within a construction period that may have lasted only a few decades. This implies not only advanced engineering knowledge, but also a highly organized workforce, capable of coordinating quarrying, transportation, carving, and assembly on an unprecedented scale. The mystery deepens further when examining other structures within the complex, such as the Erechtheion, famous for its caryatid statues, 6 sculpted female figures that function as structural columns supporting the roof of a porch. Each statue was carved from a single block of marble, yet engineered to bear significant architectural loads while maintaining delicate, artistic detail. Nearby stands the monumental entrance, known as the Propylaea, a grand gateway that demonstrates another layer of architectural sophistication. Rather than placing buildings symmetrically across the hilltop, the architects of the Acropolis designed the complex to guide visitors through a carefully orchestrated visual experience. As one approaches through the Propylaea, the Parthenon gradually reveals itself in shifting perspectives, creating a dramatic sense of scale and movement that modern architects still admire. This careful spatial choreography suggests that the builders were not only master engineers, but also masters of psychological design, understanding how architecture could shape human perception and emotional response. Some researchers have also proposed that mathematical ratios may have influenced the design of the complex, noting recurring proportions such as the ratio of 9:4 within the dimensions of the Parthenon. Whether these ratios were intentionally derived from philosophical ideas about harmony and proportion or emerged from practical design choices remains a subject of debate. What is undeniable is that the Acropolis represents a remarkable fusion of science, art, engineering, and religion. Despite earthquakes, invasions, fires, and even a catastrophic explosion during a 17th century battle that severely damaged the Parthenon, much of the complex still stands today. Its endurance is a testament to the ingenuity of the ancient Greek builders who shaped massive marble blocks, transported them across long distances, hauled them up a steep hilltop fortress, and assembled them into structures of breathtaking precision. More than 2 millennia later, the Acropolis continues to challenge modern understanding, reminding us that ancient civilizations often possessed levels of technical knowledge and organizational capability far more sophisticated than we sometimes imagine. How do you think ancient builders managed to transport and assemble such massive stone blocks on top of the Acropolis hill thousands of years ago? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the gentle green landscape of Ireland's Boyne Valley, the prehistoric monument known as Newgrange stands as one of the most astonishing engineering achievements of the ancient world. Built around 3200 BCE, making it older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid of Giza, this massive passage tomb dominates the sacred landscape of Brú na Bóinne, a UNESCO World Heritage Site filled with prehistoric structures. At first glance, Newgrange appears as a grassy mound, about 85 meters in diameter and 13 meters high, ringed by large curbstones carved with mysterious symbols. Yet beneath this seemingly simple mound lies a remarkably complex structure, a long stone passage leading to a cruciform chamber capped by an elegant, corbelled vault. Archaeologists have studied Newgrange for decades, and while much has been learned about its age and construction, many of its technological and engineering aspects remain deeply puzzling. The monument demonstrates a level of planning, astronomical awareness, and construction skill that challenges our assumptions about Neolithic societies. One of the most famous aspects of the site is its extraordinary alignment with the winter solstice sunrise. Each year, around December 21st, a narrow beam of sunlight penetrates a specially constructed opening above the entrance, known as the roof box, and travels along the 19-meter passage to illuminate the inner chamber for roughly 17 minutes. This precise solar alignment suggests a profound understanding of seasonal cycles and celestial movements, achieved thousands of years before the invention of modern instruments. Yet even more astonishing than the astronomical alignment is the sheer scale of the engineering project itself. Newgrange is composed of roughly 200,000 tons of stone and earth, forming a massive mound carefully stabilized by layers of stone retaining walls and internal chambers. The monument contains nearly 100 enormous curbstones around its perimeter, many weighing several tons each, while the internal structure is built from massive slabs that form the walls and roof of the passage and chamber. What makes this achievement particularly mysterious is the technological context in which it was built. The builders of Newgrange lived in a time before metal tools were widely used in Ireland. There were no iron chisels, no bronze saws, and certainly no steel cutting equipment. In fact, the monument predates the Bronze Age entirely. The people who constructed it worked primarily with stone tools, wooden implements, and basic organic materials. Yet despite these technological limitations, they managed to quarry, shape, transport, and precisely assemble enormous stones into one of the most sophisticated prehistoric structures in Europe. Many of the stones used in the monument were not even sourced locally. Geological studies have shown that the bright white quartz stones forming the famous facade came from the Wicklow Mountains, roughly 70 kilometers away. Granite blocks appear to originate from the Mourne Mountains, while dark, rounded stones were likely collected from coastal beaches. Transporting these materials across rivers, forests, and uneven terrain would have been an immense logistical challenge, even with modern equipment. Without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, cranes, or draft animals capable of hauling multi-ton loads, the builders would have needed to rely on human labor, ingenuity, and perhaps elaborate systems of sledges, rollers, and water transport. However, archaeologists have yet to fully reconstruct how such massive stones were moved with sufficient precision and efficiency. Some stones used in the passage and chamber weigh between 2 and 5 tons, and positioning them within a narrow corridor required careful coordination and planning. The fact that these stones were fitted together so tightly suggests that their placement was not improvised but carefully designed long before construction began. And even the mound itself reveals advanced engineering knowledge. The builders constructed layered retaining walls that hold back thousands of tons of earth while protecting the internal passage. Over 5 millennia later, the structure remains remarkably stable. The central chamber is protected by a corbelled stone roof formed by successive layers of stone slabs, each slightly overlapping the one below until they meet at a central capstone. This technique distributes the weight of the mound outward rather than downward, preventing collapse. Astonishingly, the chamber has remained almost completely waterproof for over 5,000 years, despite Ireland's famously wet climate. Rainwater drains away from the structure through carefully angled stones, and demonstrating that the builders understood not only structural stability but also long-term water management. Equally intriguing are the carvings found throughout the monument. Several of the curbstones bear intricate geometric designs, spirals, zigzags, concentric circles, and lozenge patterns pecked into the stone with remarkable precision. The most famous of these carvings is the triple spiral motif located inside the chamber. Scholars have debated the meaning of these symbols for decades. Some believe they may represent solar or lunar cycles, while others think they could encode ritual or cosmological concepts. Because no written language from this period survives, their true meaning remains unknown. These carvings may have been created before the stones were installed in the monument, and suggesting that the builders carefully planned not only the structure but also its symbolic decoration. The combination of artistic expression and architectural precision suggests that Newgrange was not simply a burial site, but a monument of profound cultural and spiritual significance. Only a small amount of cremated human remains has been discovered within the chamber, leading many researchers to believe that the monument served ceremonial or ritual purposes beyond simple burial. Some scholars propose that it functioned as a solar temple or ceremonial calendar, marking the turning of the year. Others see it as a place of ancestor worship, where the return of sunlight at the winter solstice symbolized rebirth and renewal. Whatever its true purpose, and the construction of Newgrange must have required an enormous collective effort. Hundreds of people likely worked together for many years to quarry, transport, and assemble the massive stones. This suggests a highly organized society capable of coordinating large labor forces long before advanced technology existed. The greatest mystery of Newgrange is not only its solar alignment or symbolic carvings, but the fact that such a precise and monumental structure was built without metal tools or complex machinery. Even after more than 5,000 years, the monument still stands as a powerful reminder of the ingenuity and technical knowledge possessed by ancient Neolithic communities. How do you think the Neolithic people were able to build the massive structure of Newgrange without any metal tools or modern machinery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The ruins of Taxila represent the remains of one of the most remarkable ancient megacities in South Asia, a place where multiple civilizations intersected and where urban planning, architecture, and craftsmanship reached a level of sophistication that continues to puzzle modern researchers. Located along the ancient trade corridors that connected Central Asia, Persia, and the Indian subcontinent, Taxila flourished for many centuries as a vibrant center of commerce, culture, and intellectual life. Its strategic position allowed it to absorb influences from numerous empires, including the Achaemenid Persians, the Hellenistic world following the campaigns of Alexander the Great, the Mauryan Empire, and later the Kushan rulers. These overlapping cultures shaped the character of the city, just transforming it into a cosmopolitan urban center where ideas, artistic traditions, and engineering knowledge blended in extraordinary ways. Archaeological excavations across the region reveal that Taxila was not a single city, but rather a complex cluster of settlements that evolved over centuries. Among these settlements was the carefully planned urban center of Sirkap, which was constructed during the Indo-Greek period. What makes Sirkap particularly fascinating is its geometric street layout, where long avenues intersect at near-perfect right angles to form a grid of city blocks. Such a design reflects a level of urban planning rarely seen in ancient South Asia and suggests that the builders possessed sophisticated surveying techniques capable of mapping out a large city with remarkable geometric accuracy. Creating such a grid without modern measuring equipment would have required careful mathematical planning and precise control of angles across a large landscape. Beneath these streets, archaeologists discovered another sign of advanced urban engineering, an intricate network of drainage channels designed to carry wastewater away from homes and public buildings. These channels were built with carefully calculated slopes that allowed water to flow naturally through gravity, demonstrating an understanding of hydraulic principles comparable to the famous drainage systems of ancient cities such as Mohenjo-daro. Yet while the urban planning and water management of Taxila are impressive in their own right, perhaps the most astonishing aspect of the site lies in the extraordinary precision of its construction techniques, and particularly the way its builders worked with stone and brick. Throughout the archaeological zones of Taxila, especially around major monuments like the Dharmarajka Stupa, the surviving walls reveal an almost uncanny level of accuracy in masonry. Large stone blocks were cut into consistent shapes and fitted together with joints so tight that even after nearly 2,000 years of erosion and structural damage, the seams between many stones remain barely visible. Some walls display courses of stone laid in carefully aligned horizontal layers, each block trimmed so precisely that the overall structure appears almost machine-made. The surfaces of certain stones are remarkably flat, and the angles of the edges are sharp and uniform, leading many observers to wonder how ancient craftsmen, working with relatively simple tools, could have achieved such clean geometric forms. Equally impressive is the extensive use of standardized fired bricks. Measurements taken by archaeologists reveal that bricks from many different structures share nearly identical proportions, indicating that the builders followed a controlled manufacturing system that ensured uniformity across the city. This level of standardization suggests organized workshops where bricks were produced according to strict dimensional guidelines, allowing them to fit together perfectly during construction. When these bricks were placed into walls, the builders arranged them with remarkable care, maintaining straight lines and level surfaces across long stretches of masonry. In many places, the bricks were combined with carefully shaped stone foundations that distributed weight evenly and strengthened the structure, demonstrating a deep understanding of load-bearing architecture. The precision of these techniques becomes even more remarkable when one considers the technological context of the ancient world. The craftsmen who built Taxila are generally believed to have worked with basic iron chisels, hammerstones, and simple measuring tools, yet the results they achieved rival the workmanship of much later architectural traditions. Some researchers have suggested that the builders may have used advanced construction methods such as wooden templates, string grids, or standardized measuring rods to ensure accuracy, but the exact techniques remain uncertain. Another mystery concerns the organization of labor required to produce such consistently shaped materials. The uniformity of bricks across different districts implies that the city may have maintained centralized systems of production and quality control, allowing thousands of bricks to be manufactured with identical dimensions and then distributed to building sites throughout the urban area. The precision with which stones were cut and assembled also suggests the presence of highly skilled masons whose training and techniques have largely vanished from the historical record. Beyond the purely technical aspects, the architecture of Taxila also reveals a fascinating fusion of cultural influences. The region became the heart of the Gandharan artistic tradition, where architectural elements inspired by Greek classical design, such as Corinthian-style columns and decorative friezes, were blended with Buddhist religious architecture. Sculptures discovered in monasteries and temples display naturalistic artistic styles that reflect this cross-cultural exchange. Such artistic synthesis indicates that Taxila was not merely a provincial settlement, but an international center where merchants, monks, artisans, and scholars from different parts of the ancient world interacted and exchanged ideas. Ancient texts also describe Taxila as an important intellectual center where students traveled from distant regions to study medicine, philosophy, mathematics, and political science. Although the exact physical structure of this educational tradition remains unclear, the reputation of the city suggests that it functioned as a major hub of learning long before the emergence of formal universities elsewhere in the world. Despite its prosperity and influence, however, the great city eventually declined. By the 5th century CE, a combination of political upheaval, economic changes, and invasions, possibly involving Central Asian groups such as the Hephthalites, led to the gradual abandonment of the urban centers that once defined Taxila. Over the centuries, its buildings collapsed, its streets were buried beneath soil, and its technological achievements faded into obscurity. When modern archaeologists began excavating the region, and they uncovered not only the physical remains of an ancient metropolis, but also evidence of an engineering tradition that still raises profound questions about the capabilities of early civilizations. Today, the ruins of Taxila stand as silent testimony to a society that mastered urban planning, infrastructure, and above all, the art of precise construction. The carefully cut stones and standardized bricks that still line the surviving walls demonstrate a level of technical skill that continues to challenge modern assumptions about ancient technology. Even after millennia of decay, these stones remain locked together with remarkable accuracy, suggesting that the builders of Taxila possessed methods of measurement, craftsmanship, and architectural organization that were far more advanced than we often imagine when we think of the ancient world. Rising above the limestone plains of the Yucatan Peninsula, the pyramid known as El Castillo at Chichen Itza stands as one of the most astonishing architectural achievements of the ancient Maya world. Constructed between the 9th and 12th centuries, the structure dominates the ceremonial center of the city and has long fascinated archaeologists, engineers, and astronomers alike. At first glance, the pyramid appears to be a monumental temple built for ritual and political authority. Yet deeper study has revealed that it functions as something far more sophisticated, a massive stone instrument designed to encode astronomical knowledge with extraordinary precision. The structure rises roughly 30 meters above the surrounding plaza and is composed of thousands of carefully cut limestone blocks arranged into 9-stepped terraces. At its summit sits a small temple dedicated to the feathered serpent deity Kukulkan, a figure closely associated with celestial cycles and cosmic order in Maya belief. But the true genius of the pyramid lies not merely in its scale or symbolic meaning. It lies in the astonishing level of astronomical accuracy embedded in its geometry, an accuracy that continues to puzzle modern researchers who struggle to understand how such precise calculations were achieved without modern instruments. Each of the pyramid's 4 sides contains a monumental staircase aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. Every staircase consists of 91 steps, and when these are counted together with the single platform step at the top temple, the total reaches 365. And this number corresponds exactly to the number of days in a solar year, transforming the entire pyramid into a colossal architectural calendar. Such numerical symbolism alone would already demonstrate an impressive understanding of solar cycles, yet the Maya architects went far beyond symbolic mathematics. They incorporated an optical phenomenon that unfolds with breathtaking precision during the equinoxes. On the afternoons of the spring and autumn equinox, sunlight strikes the stepped terraces at a particular angle, casting triangular shadows along the northern staircase balustrade. These triangles connect with a carved stone serpent head at the base of the stairway, gradually forming the illusion of a giant serpent slithering down the pyramid toward the earth. The effect appears slowly as the sun descends, creating 7 distinct triangular segments that seem to animate the body of Kukulkan itself. For several hours, the shadow shifts and undulates across the staircase, producing one of the most spectacular astronomical illusions ever built into architecture. This phenomenon is so precise that even slight deviations in the pyramid's orientation, stair height, or terrace angles would prevent the illusion from forming correctly. Modern computer simulations demonstrate that the margins of error involved are extremely small, meaning the builders had to understand both solar motion and geometric alignment with remarkable sophistication. What makes this achievement even more mysterious is the technological context of the Maya civilization. The society that built Chichen Itza did not possess iron tools, wheeled transport for heavy construction, or optical measuring devices comparable to those used in later scientific traditions. Their primary cutting tools were made from obsidian or other hard stone materials, yet they managed to shape and position thousands of limestone blocks with impressive accuracy. Aligning an entire pyramid complex to produce a predictable astronomical shadow effect would have required long-term observations of the sun's path across the sky and precise methods for measuring angles and orientation. Scholars believe Maya astronomer priests carefully tracked solar movements over generations, gradually refining their understanding of seasonal cycles. But exactly how this knowledge was translated into architectural planning remains a matter of debate. The pyramid's orientation deviates only slightly from true north, suggesting deliberate surveying methods that are still not fully understood. Some researchers speculate that sighting devices made from simple wooden frames or chord alignments may have been used, while others argue that the Maya relied on horizon markers and long-term observational platforms to map solar movement across the year. The pyramid also reveals another layer of engineering complexity that deepens its mystery. Investigations using ground-penetrating radar and archaeological excavations have revealed that the visible pyramid is not the original structure. Instead, it encases at least 2 earlier pyramids built within one another, forming a nested architectural sequence. Not inside the earlier pyramid, archaeologists discovered ritual objects, including a red jaguar throne decorated with jade and a reclining Chakmul statue, believed to have been used in sacrificial ceremonies. Constructing successive pyramids around earlier ones would have required careful calculations of structural weight and internal support, ensuring that the outer layers did not collapse the inner chambers. This technique demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of load distribution and structural stability. Rather than demolishing older monuments, Maya builders expanded them outward, preserving sacred spaces while simultaneously creating grander architectural expressions. Another surprising discovery emerged in recent years when geophysical surveys revealed that the pyramid was built directly above a natural cenote, a subterranean limestone sinkhole filled with water. This hidden cavity lies roughly 20 meters beneath the structure and spans about 25 meters across. Building a massive stone monument above a water-filled chamber might appear structurally risky, yet the pyramid has remained stable for centuries. Some scholars believe the location was intentionally chosen because cenotes were sacred gateways to the underworld in Maya cosmology, linking the pyramid symbolically to mythological realms beneath the earth. Others suggest the presence of water may have influenced the microclimate around the structure or provided a stable foundation within the porous limestone terrain. Still, the exact reasoning behind this placement remains uncertain, adding yet another layer of intrigue to the monument's design. And even the acoustics of the pyramid reveal unexpected sophistication. When a person claps their hands at the base of the main staircase, the sound echoes upward and returns as a chirping noise strikingly similar to the call of the sacred Quetzal bird. Acoustic researchers have shown that the stepped geometry of the staircase scatters sound waves in a way that compresses their frequencies, producing this distinctive echo. Whether this effect was intentionally engineered or is a remarkable coincidence of architectural geometry is still debated. If intentional, it would imply that Maya architects possessed an empirical understanding of acoustic reflection that allowed them to design ceremonial spaces where sound interacted with stone in symbolic ways. Yet despite all of this technological brilliance, the city of Chichen Itza eventually declined and was largely abandoned by the late 13th century. The reasons remain uncertain. Some theories point to political upheaval, others to prolonged droughts that may have strained the region's agricultural systems. Whatever the cause, the once thriving urban center faded into the jungle, leaving behind its monumental pyramid as a silent record of Maya ingenuity. Today, the structure continues to inspire awe, not only for its scale, but for the astonishing scientific knowledge embedded within its design. The Temple of Kukulkan stands as a fusion of astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and ritual symbolism, demonstrating that the Maya possessed a deep and systematic understanding of the cosmos. Yet the full extent of their observational methods and construction techniques remains partly hidden, ensuring that Chichen Itza continues to be studied as one of the most enigmatic technological achievements of the ancient world. How could the ancient Maya calculate and build a pyramid with almost perfect astronomical precision without modern scientific instruments? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising across the rugged hills of central Anatolia in modern-day Turkey, the Hattusa cyclopean city walls once protected the capital of the powerful Hittite Empire more than 3,400 years ago. Today, the ruins of this ancient defensive system still stretch across the landscape near the village of Boğazkale, forming one of the most impressive examples of Bronze Age military engineering ever discovered. Archaeologists estimate that the fortifications once extended for nearly 8 kilometers, encircling a vast city built across steep ridges, rocky slopes, and natural plateaus. Even in their ruined state, the walls reveal a level of planning, technical skill, and logistical organization that continues to puzzle historians and engineers. Constructed during a period when metallurgy was still dominated by bronze tools and when heavy construction machinery did not exist, the walls of Hattusa nevertheless display massive stone blocks carefully fitted together in a style known as cyclopean masonry, a technique so monumental that later civilizations believed only mythical giants, the Cyclopes, could have built such structures. At the base of many sections of the walls lie enormous limestone blocks weighing several tons each, cut and arranged with remarkable precision. These stones formed a powerful foundation upon which mud brick upper walls and defensive towers were raised. The lower stone courses alone demonstrate an impressive understanding of structural stability, erosion resistance, and load distribution. Even after more than 3 millennia of earthquakes, a seasonal frost, and weathering, portions of these foundations remain firmly locked in place. What fascinates researchers is how accurately many of these stones were shaped despite the limited cutting technology of the Bronze Age. The blocks often appear roughly polygonal, but still fit tightly together, reducing gaps that could weaken the structure. Some scholars believe Hittite builders used hammerstones, bronze chisels, and abrasion techniques to gradually shape the stone. Yet the efficiency and scale of the work suggest an extremely well-organized labor force and a highly refined construction tradition that is only partially understood today. The defensive system of Hattusa was also far more complex than a simple perimeter wall. The builders integrated the fortifications into the surrounding hills, and creating a layered system that included inner and outer walls, elevated walkways for soldiers, strategically placed towers, and monumental gates that controlled entry into the city. The terrain itself became part of the defense, with walls following ridgelines and cliff edges to maximize visibility and difficulty for attackers. In certain areas, the walls were reinforced with sloping embankments that made it harder for enemies to climb or undermine them. These architectural decisions reveal a sophisticated understanding of military strategy centuries before similar defensive principles appeared in other parts of the ancient world. The city gates themselves are among the most striking features of Hattusa. The famous Lion Gate, for instance, is guarded by 2 massive stone lions carved from single blocks of limestone. Their stylized yet powerful forms symbolized protection and authority, standing as both artistic achievements and psychological defenses intended to intimidate approaching visitors or enemies. Other gates, such as the King's Gate and the Sphinx Gate, were equally monumental, combining sculpture, architecture, and defensive design into a unified system that demonstrated the wealth and power of the Hittite capital. Another intriguing feature of the fortifications is the presence of hidden stone tunnels passing beneath parts of the walls. These passages, built from carefully stacked stones forming a primitive arch, allowed people to move secretly through the defenses. Some tunnels likely served as emergency exits or concealed routes for soldiers during a siege, while others may have been used to transport supplies or launch surprise counterattacks. The engineering of these tunnels again raises questions about how Hittite builders understood structural forces well enough to construct stable stone vaults long before the widespread use of true arches in later classical architecture. Yet despite all of these remarkable achievements, the greatest mystery surrounding the Hattusa walls lies not in their design, but in the practical challenge of building them. The stones forming the foundations of the walls are not only large, but extraordinarily heavy, with many weighing several tons. Transporting such blocks, even across flat ground, would have required enormous effort, but Hattusa was built across uneven hills and steep slopes. The terrain surrounding the city is rugged and rocky, and the walls climb across ridges where modern machinery would struggle to operate. The central question that continues to fascinate researchers is therefore simple but profound. How did Bronze Age builders move these massive stones into position? Archaeologists know that the limestone used for the walls came from nearby quarries, but the exact methods used to move the blocks from quarry to construction site remain uncertain. Unlike later civilizations, the Hittites left behind no detailed written descriptions of their engineering techniques. No surviving reliefs or inscriptions show the transportation process, and the archaeological record provides only indirect clues. One theory suggests that workers may have placed the stones on large wooden sledges and dragged them across prepared paths using teams of laborers and animals. Another proposes that cylindrical wooden rollers were placed beneath the stones, allowing them to be gradually pushed forward across the landscape. Some researchers even speculate that temporary earthen ramps or wooden trackways were built to move the stones uphill, similar to the techniques sometimes proposed for ancient pyramid construction in Egypt. However, each of these explanations faces practical challenges. Heavy sledges would have required enormous manpower to move up steep inclines. Rollers would have been difficult to control on rocky terrain, and ramps large enough to support multi-ton blocks would have demanded vast quantities of earth and timber. Because no direct evidence of these transportation systems has been found at Hattusa, and the logistical process behind the construction of the walls remains largely hypothetical. The sheer number of stones involved only deepens the mystery. Thousands of blocks had to be quarried, shaped, transported, and precisely positioned to create the 8-kilometer defensive ring surrounding the city. Such a project implies not only physical strength, but also a highly organized workforce capable of coordinating quarrying operations, transport teams, construction crews, and architectural planners. The Hittite state must have mobilized vast numbers of workers, possibly including soldiers, laborers, and skilled stonemasons operating under centralized supervision. Yet even with such organization, the physical act of moving these stones across the difficult terrain remains one of the most puzzling aspects of the entire project. The question becomes even more intriguing when considering the historical context. Around 1200 BCE, the Hittite Empire collapsed during the widespread upheaval known as the Bronze Age collapse, when many great civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean suddenly fell. After this collapse, the monumental construction traditions seen at Hattusa appear to have largely disappeared from the region for centuries. The specialized knowledge required to organize and execute such massive stone engineering projects may have been lost, along with the political and economic systems that supported them. As a result, the techniques used by Hittite builders to move and position the stones of the Hattusa walls remain uncertain to this day. Standing among the ruins today, visitors can still see the massive stone blocks scattered across the Anatolian hillsides, silent evidence of an extraordinary ancient engineering achievement. They show that the builders of Hattusa possessed remarkable architectural vision and organizational skill. Yet the central mystery remains: how did a Bronze Age society, without iron tools or modern machinery, transport and assemble thousands of multi-ton stones across such rugged terrain? Until clearer archaeological evidence is discovered, the cyclopean walls of Hattusa remain both a testament to human ingenuity and one of the enduring mysteries of ancient engineering. How do you think the Hittites managed to transport multi-ton stone blocks up the steep hills of Hattusa? Share your theory or thoughts in the comments below. The Hegra rock-cut tomb complex, located deep in the desert landscape of Al-Ula in Saudi Arabia, stands as one of the most astonishing archaeological sites of the ancient world. Built by the Nabatean civilization, roughly between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE, Hegra served as the southernmost major city of the Nabatean kingdom and the sister city to the famous rock-carved metropolis of Petra. Today, the site contains more than 100 monumental tombs carved directly into massive sandstone outcrops scattered across the desert plain. Rising sometimes more than 20 meters high, these tombs display elaborate facades decorated with columns, stepped crowning elements, triangular pediments, and intricate carvings that blend Nabatean artistic traditions with influences from Greek, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian architecture. Yet beyond their aesthetic beauty lies a deeper mystery: how ancient engineers were able to carve these massive structures with such precision, symmetry, and refinement, using tools that were supposedly limited to relatively simple iron implements. Unlike conventional architecture built by assembling blocks of stone, the tombs of Hegra were carved directly from the living rock itself. This method required extraordinary planning because every cut removed material that could never be replaced. Archaeological evidence suggests that many of these tombs were carved using a top-down construction method in which artisans began working at the very top of the cliff face and gradually carved downward. This approach meant that the entire design had to be carefully planned in advance. If a single measurement was wrong at the top, the error would propagate through the entire facade, potentially ruining months or even years of work. Despite this risk, the finished monuments display remarkably consistent proportions and balanced architectural elements, suggesting that Nabatean engineers possessed a sophisticated understanding of geometry, scaling, and spatial planning. Yet no surviving blueprints, design tablets, or architectural manuals have been discovered to explain how these ancient builders calculated and transferred their measurements onto massive rock surfaces. Another intriguing aspect of the complex is the extraordinary symmetry seen across many tomb facades. Columns align perfectly with decorative bands, crowning motifs mirror each other across the central axis, and architectural proportions appear strikingly deliberate. As scholars have proposed that the Nabateans used geometric grids or standardized design templates, but because the carvings were executed on uneven natural rock faces, maintaining such perfect symmetry would have been exceptionally difficult. The precision of the carvings also raises questions about the tools themselves. Iron chisels and hammerstones have been proposed as the primary carving instruments, yet the crisp edges and consistent surfaces seen in many facades suggest a level of control that is surprisingly advanced for such tools. Perhaps the most remarkable and puzzling feature of the Hegra tombs, however, is the exceptionally smooth finish of the stone surfaces, an element that continues to intrigue archaeologists and engineers alike. Many of the monumental facades appear almost perfectly flattened, and as though the sandstone had been carefully polished after carving. Large vertical surfaces spanning several meters show very little irregularity, and some sections appear so even that they resemble the work of modern stone finishing techniques. This is particularly surprising because sandstone, while softer than granite, can fracture or crumble when worked improperly. Achieving such uniform smoothness across enormous vertical surfaces would have required careful control of cutting depth and finishing techniques. Some researchers suggest that Nabatean craftsmen may have used multi-stage finishing processes, beginning with rough chiseling, followed by finer tools, abrasion techniques, or repeated smoothing using stone grinders and sand. However, clear physical evidence for these finishing methods remains limited and leaving scholars uncertain about the exact techniques involved. The mystery deepens when examining close-up photographs of certain tomb facades. In some areas, subtle tool marks are visible, yet they are arranged in such regular patterns that they appear almost methodical, as if each section had been deliberately leveled and refined layer by layer. In other places, the stone seems so evenly finished that the marks of the original carving tools have nearly vanished altogether. This suggests the possibility that Nabatean artisans employed a highly systematic approach to stone finishing, perhaps combining chiseling, scraping, grinding, and polishing techniques that have not yet been fully reconstructed by modern archaeologists. And the scale of these surfaces makes the accomplishment even more impressive. Flattening a small stone slab is challenging enough, but smoothing an entire cliffside facade several stories tall is a far more demanding task. Incomplete tombs scattered throughout Hegra offer rare glimpses into the carving process and hint at how the builders might have worked. These unfinished monuments reveal stepped cutting layers where large volumes of stone were removed gradually. They also suggest that workers may have stood on temporary ledges carved directly into the rock while shaping the facade. Yet even these clues do not fully explain how the final surfaces were refined to such remarkable smoothness, or how artisans maintained consistent alignment across massive vertical planes. Without written records describing the process, and much of the technology behind this stone finishing remains speculative. The sophistication of these engineering techniques is even more astonishing when considering the harsh environment in which the Nabateans operated. Hegra lies in an arid desert region characterized by extreme temperatures, limited water resources, and isolation from major population centers. Yet the Nabateans developed not only monumental architecture, but also advanced systems of water management, trade networks, and urban planning that allowed their cities to flourish in this inhospitable landscape. The rock-cut tombs of Hegra therefore represent not only burial monuments, but also powerful demonstrations of technical knowledge and artistic mastery. Today, more than 2,000 years after their creation, do the tombs still stand as silent witnesses to a civilization whose engineering capabilities remain partly unexplained. The extraordinary precision of the carvings, the carefully balanced architectural compositions, the top-down construction method, and above all the astonishingly smooth stone surfaces all hint at techniques and craftsmanship that modern researchers are still struggling to fully understand. As archaeological research continues, Hegra remains a place where the past challenges our assumptions about ancient technology, reminding us that even in the remote deserts of Arabia, long-lost civilizations were capable of achieving feats of engineering that still inspire wonder today. How do you think the ancient Nabateans were able to create stone surfaces that smooth and precise in the middle of the desert more than 2,000 years ago? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising quietly on a hill in the heart of central India, the ancient complex of Sanchi Stupa stands as one of the oldest and most enigmatic surviving Buddhist architectural landscapes in the world. The origins of this remarkable monument trace back to the 3rd century BCE during the reign of the Mauryan emperor Ashoka the Great, a ruler known for spreading Buddhism across vast territories of the Indian subcontinent. At first glance, the Great Stupa of Sanchi appears deceptively simple, a massive hemispherical mound rising above a circular stone terrace. Yet the longer archaeologists and historians study the site, the more it becomes clear that the complex embodies a level of architectural planning, geometric understanding, and stone craftsmanship that continues to puzzle modern researchers. The central dome itself, and carefully shaped into a near-perfect hemisphere, reflects an advanced grasp of structural balance and load distribution. Constructed from layers of stone and brick, the monument has remained stable for more than 2 millennia, despite weathering, seismic activity, and centuries of abandonment. Achieving such a precise curved structure would have required accurate measurements and careful engineering. Yet little evidence survives, explaining exactly how ancient builders calculated or executed this geometry using the limited tools believed to exist at the time. Surrounding the stupa is a ceremonial walkway designed for ritual circumambulation, known in Buddhist tradition as pradakshina. The path is enclosed by a stone railing that forms a nearly perfect circle around the dome, guiding pilgrims through a symbolic journey of meditation and devotion. The layout of the complex itself also reveals striking astronomical awareness. The 4 monumental gateways that mark the entrances to the stupa are positioned almost precisely along the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, suggesting that the builders understood how to orient large structures according to the movements of the sun and the wider celestial framework. Such alignment was not merely decorative, it likely carried deep ritual significance, linking the monument to cosmic order and the cycle of time. Yet among all the remarkable features of Sanchi, nothing captures the imagination of researchers more than the extraordinary stone gateways known as toranas. These towering structures stand as some of the most intricate examples of stone carving ever produced in the ancient world, and they represent the most technically mysterious element of the entire complex. Each gateway is composed of massive vertical pillars supporting 3 horizontal architraves, forming a monumental entrance that frames the sacred stupa behind it. At first glance, the gates appear elegant and harmonious, but closer inspection reveals an astonishing density of sculptural detail carved directly into the stone surfaces. Thousands of figures, humans, animals, mythological beings, trees, architectural scenes, and elaborate symbolic motifs unfold across every inch of the gateways, creating a vast narrative tapestry of early Buddhist imagery. The scenes depict episodes from the life of the Buddha, and stories from ancient Buddhist texts, and representations of pilgrimage, worship, and sacred landscapes. Remarkably, during this early period, Buddhist art often avoided direct human depictions of the Buddha, instead representing him symbolically through footprints, empty thrones, sacred trees, or the wheel of Dharma. The toranas of Sanchi therefore function not only as architectural gateways, but also as monumental stone manuscripts, visually preserving the philosophical and spiritual ideas of early Buddhism. What makes these carvings particularly mysterious is the extraordinary precision with which they were executed. The sandstone used in the construction of the gateways is relatively durable, and carving such complex scenes into large monolithic blocks would have required exceptional control over cutting tools and techniques. Here, many figures are rendered with delicate facial expressions, layered clothing folds, and intricate jewelry details only a few millimeters deep. Some carvings overlap one another in complex compositions, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of depth and spatial arrangement. The density of decoration is so intense that nearly every visible surface of the toranas is covered with relief sculpture. Yet the overall composition remains balanced and harmonious rather than chaotic. Achieving this level of detail would be impressive even with modern mechanical tools, but the artisans who created the gateways worked more than 2,000 years ago using only hand tools made primarily from iron or bronze. Scholars have long debated how such intricate carving could be achieved with the technology of the time. Yet the surfaces appear remarkably smooth, and the lines of the carvings remain crisp even after centuries of erosion. Some motifs are so finely cut that they resemble delicate wood carving rather than stone sculpture, raising questions about whether specialized carving techniques, perhaps involving abrasives, polishing stones, or lost methods of surface finishing, were employed by the ancient craftsmen. Equally puzzling is the sheer scale of labor required to produce these gateways. Each Tirana consists of several massive stone elements weighing multiple tons, yet every one of these blocks had to be carved with narrative scenes before being assembled into the final structure. This implies careful planning at every stage of construction, quarrying the stone, transporting it up the hill to the Sanchi site, shaping the pillars and beams, and then executing the intricate relief carvings without compromising the structural integrity of the stone. Some archaeologists believe that teams of highly specialized artisans may have worked together over many years, passing down techniques through tightly guarded guild traditions. Others suggest that the complexity of the carvings indicates the existence of sophisticated design systems or templates that allowed artists to coordinate their work across large surfaces. However, no written manuals or technical documents describing such processes have ever been discovered, leaving the exact methods of these craftsmen largely unknown. The Tiranas also demonstrate remarkable narrative organization. Each horizontal beam is divided into scenes, arranged in flowing sequences, guiding the viewer's eye from one story to the next in a continuous visual journey. This suggests that the artisans were not merely skilled stone carvers, but also master storytellers who understood how to communicate religious philosophy through visual form. Even more intriguing is the consistency of style across all four gateways, despite the possibility that they were built over different phases of construction. The proportional harmony between figures, animals, and architectural motifs suggests that the builders followed a coherent artistic system that governed scale, spacing, and composition. Maintaining such consistency across structures of this size would have required detailed planning and a deep shared knowledge among the craftsmen. Beyond the gateways, the wider Sanchi complex contains dozens of smaller stupas, and monasteries, temples, and relic shrines constructed over several centuries by successive dynasties, including the Shunga and Satavahana rulers. Despite these later additions, the overall layout of the complex retains a surprising sense of architectural unity, as though the entire hilltop had been envisioned according to a long-term design philosophy. The builders appear to have carefully integrated religious symbolism, spatial movement, and engineering stability into a single architectural system. Even the stone railings surrounding the stupa were carved with medallions, lotus motifs, and symbolic patterns that echo the imagery found on the Tiranas. These elements collectively transform the site into a carefully choreographed, sacred environment rather than a simple monument. Today, Sanchi remains one of the most important archaeological and spiritual sites in South Asia, offering a rare glimpse into the technological abilities of ancient Indian civilization. Yet many of its greatest mysteries remain unsolved. How were artisans more than 2,000 years ago able to carve stone with such remarkable precision? What techniques allowed them to balance massive architectural structures with delicate sculptural detail? The Tiranas of Sanchi stand as enduring evidence of a lost mastery of stone craftsmanship, suggesting that ancient builders possessed skills and knowledge far more advanced than we often assume today. What do you think enabled ancient craftsmen to carve the incredibly detailed Tirana gateways of Sanchi with such astonishing precision more than 2,000 years ago? Please share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. carved into towering limestone cliffs along the banks of the Yi River near the ancient capital of Luoyang. The Longmen Grottoes rock-cut mega-complex in China stands as one of the most extraordinary achievements of stone carving ever created by human hands. The site stretches across steep cliff faces for more than a kilometer, containing over 100,000 statues of Buddha, bodhisattvas, monks, and guardian figures, as well as more than 2,000 caves and niches carved directly into the rock. Construction began in the late 5th century during the Northern Wei dynasty, when the imperial court moved its capital to Luoyang and continued for several centuries, reaching its artistic peak during the Tang dynasty. Over this long period, generations of artisans, sculptors, and religious patrons transformed what had once been bare limestone cliffs into a monumental spiritual landscape that appears almost like a stone city of faith emerging from the mountainside. Yet despite the enormous amount of research carried out by historians and archaeologists, many aspects of the technological and engineering processes behind Longmen remain deeply mysterious, raising questions about how ancient craftsmen were able to achieve such staggering scale and precision with the tools available to them at the time. Unlike many ancient monuments that were assembled from blocks quarried elsewhere and transported to the construction site, the sculptures and temples of Longmen were carved directly into the natural rock face itself. This meant that every statue, every cave chamber, and every decorative detail had to be planned and executed with extreme precision before the carving even began. A mistake of only a few centimeters could permanently ruin an entire figure or destabilize a section of the cliff. Yet the thousands of sculptures across the complex show a remarkable consistency in proportion, style, and spatial arrangement. Massive statues several meters tall stand beside tiny figures only a few centimeters high, all integrated seamlessly into the same architectural composition. The most famous example is the colossal Vairocana Buddha in the Fengxian Temple area, a serene 17-meter-tall figure surrounded by towering guardian statues and celestial attendants. Carved during the Tang dynasty, under the patronage of the powerful Empress Wu Zetian, the statue's calm expression and perfectly balanced proportions demonstrate an astonishing mastery of large-scale stone sculpture. But the achievement becomes even more remarkable when one considers that these forms were not sculpted in a workshop and then assembled. They were shaped directly out of solid cliff faces, hundreds of meters long. Perhaps the most puzzling aspect of Longmen, and one that continues to fascinate researchers today, is the mystery surrounding the cutting tools and carving techniques used by the ancient artisans. The cliffs of Longmen are composed of relatively dense limestone, a material that, while softer than granite, is still difficult to carve at such scale without sophisticated equipment. Historical records indicate that the craftsmen of the Northern Wei and Tang periods mainly relied on iron chisels, hammers, and other simple hand tools. In theory, such tools should leave rough surfaces and irregular marks. Yet many of the sculptures at Longmen display surfaces that appear extraordinarily smooth and refined. The delicate folds of robes flowing across the bodies of Buddhist figures resemble soft fabric rather than rigid stone. Facial expressions reveal subtle curves around the lips and eyelids, suggesting an advanced understanding of both anatomy and sculptural technique. Some ornamental patterns carved into halos, crowns, and decorative panels are so fine that the grooves measure only a few millimeters across, yet remain sharply defined even after more than 1,000 years of weathering. But this level of detail has led some researchers to question whether the standard explanation of simple iron chisels fully accounts for the results seen at Longmen. Certain surfaces appear to have been finished with a polishing or abrasion technique that allowed craftsmen to refine the stone far beyond what basic carving tools would normally achieve. Archaeologists have proposed that abrasive sands or grinding stones might have been used to smooth the limestone after rough carving. Others suggest that the artisans possessed advanced metallurgical knowledge that enabled them to produce harder and more durable chisels than previously believed. However, direct evidence of such specialized tools remains limited, leaving open the possibility that certain methods of stone finishing practiced by ancient craftsmen have been lost over time. And even modern sculptors equipped with steel tools and mechanical equipment often express admiration for the remarkable delicacy and balance achieved by the Longmen artisans working more than a millennium ago. The challenge becomes even greater when considering the scale of the project as a whole. Over 100,000 statues were carved across the site, ranging from monumental figures towering several stories high to tiny devotional carvings hidden in small niches. Achieving consistent quality across such a vast number of works suggests an organized system of artistic training and production that operated almost like a massive workshop spread across the cliffs. Master sculptors likely designed the overall compositions, while teams of apprentices and laborers carried out the initial rough carving. Yet even this explanation leaves unanswered questions about how such a large workforce was coordinated and how stylistic coherence was maintained over centuries of continuous activity. The cliffs themselves were gradually hollowed into cave temples, meditation chambers, and ceremonial halls, each carefully carved to preserve the structural integrity of the surrounding rock. Removing too much material could have caused collapses, yet the complex remains remarkably stable to this day. Adding to the complexity of the site are thousands of inscriptions carved into the stone surfaces, many of which record the names of donors, monks, and imperial patrons who sponsored the creation of particular statues. Some inscriptions are written in characters only a few centimeters high, carved with astonishing precision into uneven rock surfaces. These texts have become an invaluable resource for historians studying the religious and political history of the period, but they also demonstrate the extraordinary control the craftsmen had over their tools. To carve such crisp characters into stone requires not only skill, but also finely sharpened instruments capable of producing extremely controlled cuts. All of these factors contribute to the lasting mystery surrounding the Longmen Grottoes. More than a religious monument, the site is a vast testament to ancient craftsmanship, carved directly into the cliffs above the Yi River. The artisans clearly possessed remarkable knowledge of stone and sculpture, yet the exact techniques they used have largely disappeared from history. Even after centuries of archaeological study, and how these ancient craftsmen transformed solid rock into one of the world's greatest sculptural landscapes remains an unsolved puzzle of ancient engineering. In your opinion, what tools and techniques did ancient artisans use to carve the Longmen Grottoes with such astonishing precision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the dry limestone plains of the Yucatan Peninsula, the monumental city of Uxmal stands as one of the most sophisticated urban centers ever built by the ancient Maya civilization. At the heart of this remarkable city is the enigmatic structure often called the Pyramid of the Magician, a towering and unusually shaped pyramid that immediately distinguishes Uxmal from nearly every other Maya site. Constructed roughly between the 6th and 10th centuries CE, the Uxmal Pyramid Mega-Complex represents the peak of what archaeologists call the Puuc architectural tradition. a style renowned for its astonishing stone craftsmanship and geometric precision. Yet despite decades of archaeological study, many aspects of the engineering techniques used here remain deeply mysterious. Unlike most Maya pyramids, which typically rest on square or rectangular foundations, the Pyramid of the Magician is built upon a rare and unusual oval base. This unconventional geometry raises significant questions about how ancient builders, working without metal tools, advanced surveying equipment, or written architectural plans, were able to conceive and execute such a complex design with remarkable structural stability. Excavations have revealed that the pyramid itself was not constructed in a single phase, but rather through multiple building episodes in which successive pyramids were erected over earlier ones, gradually enlarging the structure while preserving its stability. Each construction phase required precise calculations of weight distribution and internal support. Yet the entire monument has survived more than 1,000 years of erosion, earthquakes, and environmental stress. Equally puzzling is the steep stairway that ascends the western facade of the pyramid, rising at a dramatic angle that would have made regular use difficult and even dangerous. Some scholars believe the stairway may have served a ceremonial function rather than a practical one, perhaps symbolizing an ascent into the sacred realm of the gods. However, the most astonishing aspect of Uxmal is not merely the unusual form of its pyramid, but the extraordinary technological sophistication of its stone construction. The city represents the finest expression of puke masonry, a construction method that demonstrates an almost unbelievable level of precision despite the technological limitations of the Maya world. The region surrounding Uxmal lacks many of the building resources available to other ancient civilizations. There were no large rivers for transporting heavy materials, no iron or steel tools for shaping stone, and no draft animals or wheeled vehicles to assist with construction. Instead, the Maya builders relied almost entirely on limestone, extracted from local quarries, shaping and fitting each block by hand. What makes this achievement so remarkable is the extraordinary accuracy with which these stones were cut and assembled. In Puuk architecture, the lower portions of buildings were typically constructed from large limestone blocks, forming a strong structural core, while the upper facades were covered with thin, finely carved veneer stones arranged in elaborate patterns. These stones were not randomly placed, but carefully shaped so that they fit together with minimal mortar, creating surfaces that appear astonishingly smooth and geometrically precise. Even today, visitors standing before the walls of Uxmal often remark that the masonry looks almost machine-made, as though the stones had been cut with modern equipment. Thousands of small blocks were meticulously carved and arranged to form vast mosaic-like decorations across entire building facades. Many of these designs depict the face of the Maya rain god Chak, whose long curved nose appears repeatedly across the architecture, reflecting the importance of rain and water in the arid Puuk region. Each decorative element required careful measurement and placement so that the patterns aligned perfectly across wide surfaces, and creating symmetrical compositions that remain striking even after centuries of weathering. The technical question that continues to puzzle archaeologists is how Maya artisans achieved such precision using tools made primarily from stone. Without metal chisels capable of producing fine cuts, shaping thousands of limestone pieces with such accuracy would have required immense skill, time, and coordination. Furthermore, the sheer scale of the decorative mosaics suggests a level of planning and architectural design that is difficult to reconcile with the limited written records left behind by the Maya of this region. Some researchers propose that master builders possessed advanced knowledge of geometry and construction techniques passed down through generations, while others suggest that highly specialized artisan guilds may have overseen different stages of the building process. Yet even these explanations struggle to fully account for the consistency and accuracy observed throughout the city's architecture. Another mystery lies in the possible astronomical alignments embedded within the layout of Uxmal. Certain buildings appear to be oriented towards specific solar events or planetary cycles, particularly those associated with the movements of Venus, a celestial body of great importance in Maya cosmology. Observations have suggested that during particular times of the year, sunlight interacts with the structures in dramatic ways, illuminating doorways or architectural elements at precise moments. If intentional, these alignments would imply that the architects of Uxmal possessed not only advanced construction techniques but also sophisticated astronomical knowledge integrated directly into their designs. Adding to the enigma is the fact that Uxmal, once one of the most powerful and densely populated cities in the region, was mysteriously abandoned around the 10th century. The cause of this decline remains uncertain. Some scholars point to prolonged droughts that may have destabilized agricultural systems, while others suggest political upheaval or regional conflict. However, no single theory fully explains why such a technologically and architecturally advanced city would fall silent. Today, the Uxmal Pyramid megacomplex stands as one of the most compelling examples of ancient engineering in the Americas. In its unusual pyramid geometry, layered construction history, steep ceremonial stairways, and above all the astonishing mastery of puke stone technology, reveal a civilization capable of achieving extraordinary architectural precision without the tools or machinery normally associated with such achievements. Even after centuries of archaeological investigation, the techniques used by Maya builders at Uxmal continue to challenge modern understanding. The stones remain locked together with quiet perfection, their intricate mosaics still watching over the jungle landscape, leaving a lingering question that scholars have yet to fully answer. How did an ancient society, working with seemingly simple tools, create architecture of such breathtaking complexity and precision? And how do you think the ancient builders of Uxmal were able to achieve such astonishing precision in puke stone construction without metal tools or modern machinery? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. Perched high along the rugged canyon walls of Bandelier National Monument, the Bandelier cliff-dwelling megacomplex, USA, stands as one of the most remarkable ancient settlements ever carved directly into stone. Hidden within the dramatic landscape of Frijoles Canyon, this vast complex was created by the ancestral Puebloans, a civilization that flourished in the American Southwest centuries before European contact. At first glance, the site appears almost surreal. Hundreds of human-made rooms punctuate the sheer volcanic cliffs, forming what looks like an ancient vertical city suspended between earth and sky. Archaeologists estimate that these dwellings were constructed between the 11th and 16th centuries, during a period when Pueblo communities were expanding across the region. Yet, despite decades of research, Bandelier continues to raise profound questions about ancient engineering, social organization, and one of the most intriguing mysteries of all, the sudden abandonment of this extraordinary cliff city. What makes Bandelier so extraordinary is the sheer scale and integration of its architecture. Rather than constructing isolated caves, the inhabitants created an entire settlement embedded within the canyon walls. Hundreds of rooms were hollowed directly into the soft, volcanic rock known as tuff, forming living quarters, storage chambers, and communal spaces. In many areas, masonry structures once stood in front of these cave rooms, creating multi-level dwellings where stone houses were attached to the cliff face itself. From a distance, the complex resembles a honeycomb carved by human hands, is stretching across long sections of the canyon walls. This arrangement suggests that Bandelier was not merely a temporary refuge, but a thriving community with a carefully organized spatial layout. Clusters of rooms likely housed extended families, while open areas and ceremonial structures, known as kivas, served social and spiritual functions. The complexity of the site indicates a society capable of planning large communal construction projects, coordinating labor, and sustaining life in a challenging environment. The technology required to create this settlement remains one of its most fascinating aspects. The cliff dwellings were carved into layers of volcanic tuff formed by ancient eruptions in the region. This rock is relatively soft compared to granite, yet it still requires considerable effort to shape using primitive tools. Non-archaeological evidence suggests that the ancestral Puebloans relied primarily on stone hammers, chisels, and other simple implements to excavate these chambers. Even so, the interiors of many rooms display surprisingly smooth and consistent surfaces. Walls curve gently into ceilings, and alcoves appear with deliberate symmetry. When multiplied across hundreds of rooms, the amount of labor required becomes staggering. Scholars have long debated whether the construction occurred gradually over generations or followed a more organized plan from the beginning. The uniformity seen in some sections hints that the inhabitants possessed sophisticated knowledge of how volcanic tuff behaved during excavation, allowing them to carve stable chambers without causing structural collapse. Still, the full efficiency of their methods remains poorly understood. Equally intriguing is how people accessed many of these cliffside rooms. Numerous chambers are positioned several meters above the canyon floor, reachable today only by ladders installed for modern visitors. Archaeologists believe that the original inhabitants likely used wooden ladders that could be raised or removed when necessary. This design may have offered defensive advantages, transforming the settlement into a naturally fortified community protected by steep rock walls. Yet this raises practical questions that remain difficult to answer. If ladders were the primary means of access, how were daily necessities such as water, firewood, and food transported to these elevated homes? How did families with children or elders manage the constant climbing required for daily life? Some researchers have proposed that wooden balconies or scaffolding systems once extended along the cliff face, forming interconnected platforms that have long since decayed. If such structures existed, they would have dramatically altered the appearance of the complex, creating a multi-level settlement where stone rooms and wooden walkways merged into a single architectural system. Beyond the architecture itself, Bandelier also reveals a culture deeply adapted to its environment. The canyon provided access to water from seasonal streams, fertile soil for small-scale agriculture, and natural protection from harsh desert winds. The cliff dwellings likely offered a stable microclimate, not remaining cool during the scorching summers and warmer during winter nights. The ancestral Puebloans cultivated crops such as maize, beans, and squash in nearby terraces, while hunting and gathering supplemented their diet. The location also carried spiritual significance. Scattered throughout the canyon are petroglyphs and pictographs, symbols carved or painted into the rock by ancient inhabitants. These images depict animals, geometric patterns, and ceremonial figures, hinting at a rich cosmology intertwined with the surrounding landscape. Yet the precise meaning of many of these symbols remains unknown, leaving researchers to speculate about the beliefs and rituals that once animated this cliffside community. Despite the impressive engineering and apparent stability of life in Bandelier, the most profound mystery surrounding the site lies in its ultimate fate. Sometime in the 16th century, the settlement was gradually abandoned. The once bustling cliff dwellings fell silent, and the inhabitants migrated elsewhere across the southwest. What makes this disappearance so puzzling is that the structures themselves show little sign of catastrophic destruction. There is no evidence of a massive battle, widespread fire, or sudden collapse that might explain a rapid evacuation. Instead, the abandonment appears to have occurred over time, as if entire communities simply chose to leave their remarkable stone homes behind. Several theories attempt to explain this departure, yet none fully resolves the puzzle. One possibility involves climate change. The American Southwest experienced periods of severe drought during the late prehistoric era, which could have reduced crop yields and strained local water resources. If agriculture became unreliable, communities may have been forced to relocate to regions with more stable environmental conditions. Another hypothesis focuses on social dynamics. As Pueblo populations shifted and reorganized, communities sometimes merged into larger settlements for economic or defensive reasons. Bandelier's inhabitants may have joined other Pueblo groups in nearby river valleys where trade networks and agricultural land were more accessible. There is also the possibility of external pressures. The arrival of Spanish explorers in the region during the 16th century introduced new diseases, political disruptions, and cultural transformations that reverberated through indigenous societies. Although Bandelier was likely abandoned before sustained European presence reached the area, the broader instability of the era could have influenced migration patterns. Yet even these explanations leave unanswered questions. If drought or social change drove the inhabitants away, why did they not return once conditions improved? Why abandon such an ingeniously constructed settlement carved directly into the protective walls of a canyon? Today, the empty rooms of Bandelier stand as silent witnesses to a vanished community. Wind moves through the same chambers that once sheltered families, and sunlight traces the outlines of doorways carved centuries ago. The ladders used by modern visitors offer only a glimpse of how ancient inhabitants once navigated this vertical city. Every carved alcove and weathered wall suggests a story that archaeology has only partially uncovered. The Bandelier cliff-dwelling megacomplex therefore remains more than a remarkable archaeological site. It is a lingering question carved into stone. Who truly built this extraordinary cliff city? How exactly did they engineer such a vast settlement with simple tools? And perhaps most intriguingly of all, why did the people who created it ultimately walk away, leaving behind one of the most breathtaking cliffside communities ever built in the ancient world? What do you think truly caused the ancient inhabitants to abandon the cliff city of Bandelier? Prolonged drought, social changes, or some other mysterious reason we still don't understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Maijishan Grottoes, known collectively as the Maijishan Cliff Temple Complex, rise dramatically from the rugged mountains of Gansu Province like a vertical city carved directly into stone. Perched on the face of a towering sandstone peak nearly 80 meters high, the site contains more than 190 caves, thousands of Buddhist sculptures, and vast stretches of ancient murals, all seemingly suspended on a near-vertical cliff. The name Maijishan, meaning Wheatstack Mountain, comes from the mountain's distinctive shape, which resembles a massive pile of harvested grain rising abruptly from the surrounding landscape. For over 15 centuries, this extraordinary complex has stood as one of the most remarkable Buddhist monuments along the ancient Silk Road, where merchants, monks, and travelers once carried goods, ideas, and religious traditions between East and West. Yet beyond its spiritual significance and artistic beauty, Maijishan has long fascinated historians, archaeologists, and engineers for a deeper reason: the astonishing technical challenge of creating an entire sacred complex on the face of a sheer cliff using the limited tools available more than 1,500 years ago. The origins of the grottos date back to the 5th century during the Northern Liang dynasty, when Buddhist monks began carving meditation chambers into the soft sandstone cliffs. Over the centuries that followed, successive dynasties expanded the complex, adding new caves, sculptures, and elaborate devotional spaces. Today, the site contains more than 7,000 statues, ranging from small devotional figures to monumental sculptures towering over 15 meters tall. Many of these figures depict the Buddha, bodhisattvas, and celestial attendants, their robes flowing with delicate folds and their expressions radiating calm serenity. What makes these statues particularly extraordinary is that they were not carved as freestanding monuments and then placed inside the caves. Instead, many of them were built directly onto the cliff face itself. Ancient artisans first shaped the rock surface, then constructed the bodies of the statues using a mixture of clay, straw, and plaster, layered over structural supports anchored into the stone. This technique allowed them to create massive sculptures without placing excessive weight on the fragile sandstone cliff. Even so, crafting such enormous figures while standing on narrow ledges hundreds of feet above the ground must have required astonishing skill, balance, and courage. Equally remarkable is the network of narrow wooden walkways that cling to the cliff face, connecting the grottos like suspended bridges in the sky. These pathways snake across the mountain wall, turning corners, rising and falling along the rock face, sometimes hanging in open air with nothing but wooden beams separating visitors from the drop below. The walkways seen today have been restored many times over the centuries, but archaeological evidence suggests that similar structures existed in ancient times, allowing monks and pilgrims to move between caves that would otherwise be unreachable. The engineering challenge of these walkways is significant even by modern standards. Wooden beams had to be anchored into the sandstone using holes carved directly into the rock, forming a skeletal framework that could support the weight of travelers while resisting erosion and occasional earthquakes. Considering that the region has experienced numerous seismic events over the centuries, the survival of so many caves and sculptures for more than a millennium is itself astonishing. The sandstone cliffs are relatively soft and vulnerable to weathering, yet the complex has endured through centuries of natural forces, suggesting that the ancient builders possessed a deep understanding of the rock's structural properties. Inside many of the caves, the interiors reveal surprisingly sophisticated architectural planning. The ceilings are carefully shaped into domes or vaults. Walls are arranged with symmetrical niches for statues, and surfaces are covered with vibrant murals depicting Buddhist cosmology, sacred narratives, and celestial beings. These interiors appear far too regular to have been carved randomly into the cliff. Instead, they imply that ancient craftsmen used precise measuring techniques to maintain symmetry and proportion while excavating the chambers from solid rock. Yet this precision raises another puzzle. How could such measurements have been made accurately while suspended on a steep cliff face, where even standing steadily would have been difficult. The tools available at the time were simple: chisels, hammers, ropes, and wooden scaffolding. Yet the finished spaces display remarkable balance and harmony. And despite all these remarkable achievements, the most profound mystery of Maijishan lies not in the statues, the murals, or even the cliffside architecture itself. The greatest unanswered question concerns the very beginning of the project. How did the ancient builders reach the cliff face in the first place? Many of the earliest caves are located far above ground level, in positions that appear almost impossible to access without modern climbing equipment. Before any walkway could be constructed, workers would have needed a stable platform from which to carve the first chambers. But those platforms themselves would require some form of access to the cliff. This paradox has puzzled researchers for decades. One widely discussed theory suggests that enormous wooden scaffolding structures were erected from the base of the mountain, as gradually rising upward as construction progressed. However, such scaffolding would have required enormous quantities of timber and extremely stable anchoring points in the rock. Yet archaeological evidence for these structures is surprisingly scarce. Another theory proposes that workers descended from the top of the mountain, using ropes, carving the caves from above downward. While this method might explain how the earliest chambers were reached, it raises further questions about how heavy tools and building materials were transported safely along the cliff face. Some researchers have even suggested that natural ledges or temporary earthen ramps may once have existed along parts of the mountain, providing access routes that later eroded away. Yet the geology of Maijishan does not clearly support this idea, and the current terrain offers few clues about how such paths might have looked. The mystery becomes even more intriguing when considering the scale of the project. Creating hundreds of caves and thousands of sculptures would have required decades, perhaps centuries, of continuous work by skilled artisans and laborers. These workers would have needed reliable ways to transport water, clay, pigments, tools, and structural materials up the cliff, while maintaining safe access routes for themselves. The complexity of such logistics suggests a level of organization and engineering planning that is rarely associated with early cliffside construction. For this reason, Maijishan stands not only as a sacred Buddhist monument, but also as a lasting puzzle of ancient engineering. The cliff temples appear almost to defy gravity, unsuspended between earth and sky. Yet the central question remains unanswered. How did the first builders reach the vertical cliff face before any walkways existed? The answer may lie in lost construction techniques, vanished scaffolding systems, or climbing methods that left no trace in the archaeological record. Until new evidence appears, the Maijishan Cliff Temple complex will remain one of the most fascinating mysteries of ancient architecture. How do you think the ancient builders first reached the Maijishan cliff face when there were no walkways or scaffolding yet? Did they construct massive wooden scaffolding, descend from the top with ropes, or use a construction technique that has been completely lost to history? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. The Persepolis Terrace mega-complex in Iran stands as one of the most remarkable architectural achievements of the ancient world, a monumental platform that once supported the ceremonial heart of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Constructed beginning around 518 BCE under the reign of Darius the Great, the complex was designed not simply as a city, but as a stage upon which imperial power could be displayed to the world. The terrace itself is enormous, approximately 450 meters long and 300 meters wide, rising up to about 18 meters high, formed partly by carving into the natural slope of the Kue Rahmat mountain and partly by building colossal retaining walls and filling the interior with massive quantities of stone and earth to create a perfectly level platform. From this artificial plateau rose an entire landscape of palaces, audience halls, staircases, gates, and towering columns, all arranged in a carefully planned ceremonial complex where kings received ambassadors, dignitaries, and tribute from across one of the largest empires in ancient history. Yet what makes the Persepolis terrace truly fascinating is not only its scale, but the extraordinary engineering techniques used to build it, many of which remain partly unexplained. The terrace itself represents a massive feat of landscape engineering. Ancient builders had to reshape the mountain slope, construct enormous stone retaining walls, and fill the interior with rock and soil to produce a stable foundation capable of supporting heavy palaces and columned halls. Now, archaeologists believe that the first phase of construction focused almost entirely on preparing this monumental platform before the palaces themselves could be erected. The result was not just a building site, but an artificial mountain of stone, a carefully engineered base that elevated the imperial complex above the surrounding plain and made it visible from far away, a symbolic display of imperial authority. Among the most intriguing technological aspects of the terrace is the extraordinary precision with which its stone blocks were cut and fitted together, often with little or no mortar between them. The builders used large blocks of grey limestone quarried nearby, shaping them with remarkable accuracy so that each stone fitted tightly against the next. Even today, now many of these blocks appear so precisely aligned that the joints between them are barely visible. This technique required not only skilled craftsmanship, but also advanced knowledge of stoneworking and geometry. Archaeological studies of the quarries near Persepolis reveal that workers cut deep channels around blocks and inserted wooden wedges into specially carved holes. When the wedges were soaked with water, they expanded, splitting the stone from the bedrock in controlled layers. While this explains how the blocks were extracted, it does not fully explain the extraordinary precision of their final shaping and fitting. Considering that Achaemenid builders relied primarily on iron tools and relatively simple technology, the ability to produce such smooth surfaces and perfectly aligned joints on multi-ton blocks remains one of the enduring technical mysteries of the site. The accuracy of these stone joints suggests an advanced system of measurement and planning that archaeologists are still trying to fully understand. This mastery of stone construction extended throughout the complex. The terrace was accessed by a monumental double staircase built around 519 BCE, designed with unusually shallow steps that allowed large groups of people, possibly even horses or ceremonial processions, to ascend smoothly to the platform. The stairways themselves are covered with elaborate relief sculptures showing representatives from different nations of the empire bringing gifts to the Persian king. These reliefs are carved with astonishing precision and detail, revealing clothing patterns, hairstyles, weapons, and cultural differences among the empire's many peoples. The uniform quality of these carvings across hundreds of meters of stone suggests a highly organized system of artisans working with standardized techniques. Equally impressive were the colossal columned halls that stood on the terrace, particularly the Apadana, the grand audience hall used by the Persian kings to receive delegations. Originally supported by 72 stone columns, rising approximately 24 meters high, the hall represented one of the largest columned structures of the ancient world. The columns were crowned with elaborate capitals shaped like pairs of bulls or other mythical creatures, and designed to support massive wooden beams that formed the roof. The engineering challenge of raising such heavy stone columns to great heights and balancing them with wooden superstructures must have required sophisticated planning and coordination. Even today, historians debate exactly how the ancient builders lifted these enormous elements into place without cranes or modern machinery. Another technological marvel hidden beneath the terrace is its extensive water management system. Because Persepolis sits at the foot of a mountain where seasonal rain and snowmelt could easily flood the site, the builders created a network of underground channels and drainage conduits to carry water away from the palaces and staircases. These channels were carefully integrated into the architecture, directing runoff from roofs and courtyards into an underground system capable of handling large volumes of water. The effectiveness of this drainage network, which has continued to function for more than 2 millennia, demonstrates the sophisticated hydraulic knowledge possessed by Achaemenid engineers. Despite the immense scale and complexity of the Persepolis terrace, its true purpose remains somewhat mysterious. Unlike other ancient capitals such as Babylon or Susa, Persepolis appears to have functioned primarily as a ceremonial center rather than a continuously inhabited city. Many scholars believe it was used mainly during the Persian New Year festival of Nowruz, when representatives from across the empire gathered to present tribute to the king. If this interpretation is correct, it means that one of the largest architectural projects of the ancient world was built largely for symbolic and ritual purposes, a monumental display of imperial power rather than a practical administrative center. The Persepolis Terrace therefore stands as both a triumph of ancient engineering and a puzzle that continues to fascinate historians and archaeologists. Its immense artificial platform, precisely cut and fitted stone blocks, towering columned halls, intricate relief sculptures, and advanced drainage systems reveal a civilization capable of astonishing technical sophistication more than 2,500 years ago. Yet many aspects of its construction, especially the remarkable precision of its stone masonry, remain difficult to fully explain with the tools and technology known to have existed at the time. For this reason, the Persepolis Terrace megacomplex is not only a relic of imperial Persia, but also one of the enduring enigmas of ancient architectural technology, a place where the achievements of the past still challenge our understanding of how ancient civilizations built monuments on such a monumental scale. How do you think the ancient Persians were able to cut and fit massive stone blocks with such near-perfect precision, almost without using mortar, despite the limited technology of their time? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments section below. Perched high above the stark wilderness of the Judean desert, overlooking the shimmering waters of the Dead Sea, the Masada Desert Fortress megacomplex in Israel stands as one of the most extraordinary engineering achievements of the ancient world. Rising roughly 450 meters above the surrounding terrain on an isolated plateau with nearly vertical cliffs, Masada appears almost impossible as a construction site. Yet more than 2,000 years ago, this barren summit was transformed into a vast fortified complex by the Judean king Herod the Great, who ruled in the 1st century BCE. Herod envisioned Masada not only as a military fortress, but also as a luxurious desert refuge, complete with palaces, storerooms, defensive walls, and sophisticated infrastructure. Even today, archaeologists and engineers studying the site are struck by the sheer logistical difficulty of building such a complex in a location that is both geographically isolated and environmentally extreme. Transporting thousands of tons of building materials, food supplies, timber, and decorative elements to the top of a narrow mountain plateau would have required immense planning and coordination. yet almost no written record survives explaining how these operations were organized. One of the most astonishing and still partly mysterious aspects of Masada is its enormous water storage system, a technological achievement that allowed the fortress to function in one of the driest regions of the Middle East. The Judean desert receives very little rainfall each year, and the plateau of Masada itself has no natural springs. Despite this, the fortress was equipped with a network of massive reservoirs capable of holding tens of thousands of cubic meters of water. Archaeologists have identified at least a dozen giant cisterns carved into the rock and built along the slopes of the mountain. Together, they formed a carefully engineered system designed to capture and store precious runoff from seasonal flash floods that flowed through distant desert valleys. Channels and aqueduct-like conduits were carved into the cliffs to intercept water from wadis several kilometers away, redirecting it toward the fortress complex. From there, the water would cascade through a series of reservoirs cut directly into the bedrock of the mountain, gradually filling the cisterns that supplied the inhabitants of Masada. The scale of these reservoirs is remarkable. Some are large enough to resemble underground chambers rather than simple water tanks, and collectively they could store an estimated 40 to 50,000 cubic meters of water, enough to sustain hundreds of people for extended periods during sieges or droughts. What makes this system particularly fascinating is the precision required to make it work. The channels guiding the water had to be engineered with carefully calculated gradients so that rainwater and floodwater would flow naturally into the cisterns without stagnating or eroding the fragile desert slopes. If the angle of the channels were too steep, the rushing water could destroy the system. If too shallow, the water might fail to reach the reservoirs at all. Achieving this delicate balance in rugged desert terrain without modern surveying instruments raises important questions about the level of mathematical and engineering knowledge possessed by Herod's builders. Even more puzzling is the construction of the reservoirs themselves. Many of the cisterns were carved deep into solid rock, then coated with hydraulic plaster to prevent leakage. Creating such enormous cavities while maintaining structural stability would have required careful understanding of rock composition and load distribution. Yet the tools available in the 1st century BCE were limited to relatively simple metal implements and manual labor. The fact that these reservoirs have survived for more than 2 millennia, still clearly visible today, demonstrates how durable and well-designed the system was. And beyond its remarkable water infrastructure, Masada also contained a complex network of defensive walls and towers encircling the plateau. The fortification lines stretched roughly 1.3 kilometers around the summit and incorporated nearly 30 towers positioned at strategic points along the cliffs. The walls themselves were constructed with a double shell technique in which 2 outer stone faces were filled with interior rooms and corridors. These spaces could function as barracks, storage chambers, or defensive positions, illustrating how the architecture of the fortress blended military practicality with efficient use of limited space. Within the walls stood numerous buildings, including warehouses capable of storing grain, oil, wine, and other essential supplies. New archaeological discoveries have revealed that Masada was stocked with provisions sufficient to sustain hundreds of inhabitants for years, a logistical strategy that further underscores the importance of the water system that made long-term survival in the desert possible. Perhaps the most visually striking structure at Masada is the northern palace complex, built by Herod along the edge of the cliff. Designed as a dramatic 3-tiered structure descending the mountainside, the palace was supported by terraces that projected outward over the desert landscape. Each level served a different function. The upper level housed royal living quarters. The middle level likely contained reception halls and banquet rooms, and the lowest level formed a circular terrace that offered panoramic views across the desert and the Dead Sea. Yet constructing such a structure on a near-vertical cliff presents enormous engineering challenges even today, requiring stable foundations, careful weight distribution, and precise stone masonry. Yet the ancient builders of Masada managed to anchor the palace securely into the rock, creating a structure that has endured centuries of erosion, earthquakes, and harsh desert winds. The strategic importance of Masada became dramatically evident during the First Jewish-Roman War in the 1st century CE. According to historical accounts, Jewish rebels occupied the fortress after the fall of Jerusalem, turning it into the final stronghold of resistance against Roman rule. In response, Roman forces under the command of Flavius Silva constructed an enormous siege system around the mountain. They built a circumvallation wall stretching more than 11 kilometers across the desert to prevent escape, and erected a massive earthen ramp on the western side of the plateau to bring siege engines within striking distance of the fortress walls. The ramp itself, still visible today, is one of the largest surviving siege works from antiquity and demonstrates the extraordinary determination of the Roman army to overcome the natural defenses of Masada. Yet even in the context of this dramatic military history, the technological ingenuity embedded within the fortress, especially its sophisticated water management network, remains one of its most impressive and least fully understood achievements. Ultimately, the Masada Desert Fortress mega-complex is far more than a dramatic historical site. It stands as a remarkable example of ancient ingenuity in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Transforming an isolated desert plateau into a self-sustaining, fortified city required extraordinary planning, architecture, and engineering knowledge. Among all its features, the vast water storage system remains the most impressive mystery. Without rivers, springs, or modern technology, Masada's builders managed to capture and store enough water to sustain life in the desert. Even today, archaeologists still debate how this system was precisely designed and constructed, reminding us that the technological abilities of ancient civilizations were often far more advanced than we assume. How do you think ancient builders were able to design and construct the massive water storage system on top of the Masada mountain fortress in the middle of the desert without modern technology? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Abu Simbel temples, carved directly into a sandstone cliff along the western bank of the Nile in southern Egypt, stand as one of the most astonishing achievements of ancient engineering and monumental design ever attempted by human civilization. Built during the reign of the powerful pharaoh Ramesses II in the 13th century BCE, the complex was intended not only as a temple dedicated to the gods, but also as a colossal statement of royal power, visible to anyone traveling along the Nile. At first glance, the structure appears impossibly ambitious, an entire mountain face transformed into a symmetrical architectural facade dominated by 4 seated statues of the pharaoh, each rising roughly 20 meters high. Behind this dramatic entrance lies a sequence of chambers carved deep into the rock, extending more than 60 meters into the interior of the cliff. What makes Abu Simbel remarkable is not merely its size or artistic beauty, but the extraordinary technical precision required to excavate an entire temple from a single mass of stone, while maintaining structural stability, symmetry, and alignment over such a scale. Unlike structures built from stacked blocks, this monument required ancient engineers and stoneworkers to remove thousands of tons of rock while carefully preserving the columns, halls, reliefs, and statues that form the temple's internal architecture. Every column had to remain aligned, every ceiling thickness had to be calculated in advance to prevent collapse, and then every corridor had to remain perfectly straight, despite the fact that the builders were cutting deeper and deeper into solid sandstone without modern surveying tools. Yet among all the technical mysteries surrounding Abu Simbel, none is more astonishing than the temple's precise astronomical alignment. Twice every year, on approximately the 22nd day of February and the 22nd day of October, sunlight at sunrise travels across the desert horizon and penetrates the temple's entrance. The beam of light moves slowly along the central axis of the temple, passing through the entrance hall, the hypostyle chamber, and the inner corridor before finally reaching the sanctuary chamber deep inside the mountain. There, for only a brief moment, the sunlight illuminates 3 of the 4 seated statues positioned against the back wall. The gods Ra, Harakti, and Amun, along with the deified image of Ramesses II himself. The 4th statue, representing the god Ptah, associated with the underworld and darkness, remains deliberately in shadow. The phenomenon lasts only a few minutes, but its precision is extraordinary. The temple's entire axis appears to have been designed so that the rising sun on those specific dates aligns perfectly with the sanctuary statues over a distance of more than 60 meters of carved interior space. Even a small miscalculation in orientation or elevation would have prevented the light from reaching the chamber correctly. The modern engineers examining the structure have long debated how ancient Egyptian architects could have predicted the exact solar trajectory necessary to achieve such an effect. To create this alignment, the builders would have needed a deep understanding of the annual motion of the sun across the horizon, as well as the ability to translate astronomical observation into architectural geometry. Without telescopes, precision compasses, or modern surveying instruments, the architects somehow positioned the temple with a level of astronomical accuracy that still surprises researchers today. The mystery deepens when one considers the difficulty of maintaining such precision while excavating the interior chambers of the temple. The corridor that carries the sunlight inward was not constructed by assembling stone blocks that could be adjusted later. It had to be carved gradually into the rock, meaning that every measurement had to be correct from the beginning. The builders had to maintain a perfectly straight axis from the entrance all the way to the sanctuary, ensuring that each hall and column aligned precisely with the path of the incoming sunlight. Even the heights of ceilings and the placement of statues had to be carefully calculated so they would not obstruct the beam of light during the alignment event. Such coordination suggests a sophisticated planning process that may have involved long-term observations of the sunrise position along the horizon throughout the year. Now, some scholars propose that the temple's axis was determined through repeated solar observations made from the cliff site before excavation began, while others believe that ancient Egyptian surveyors may have used simple but effective astronomical markers to track seasonal solar movement. However, the exact methods used remain unknown. Beyond its astronomical precision, the physical execution of Abu Simbel raises further engineering questions. The temple facade, dominated by 4 colossal statues of Ramesses II, was carved directly from the cliff face, yet the figures maintain consistent proportions and symmetry despite their enormous scale. Each statue sits in a seated posture with detailed facial features, crowns, and inscriptions carved into the surrounding rock. Achieving such accuracy required extraordinary control over stone removal, especially given that sandstone layers can vary in hardness and structural stability. Inside the temple, the Great Hall contains massive pillars shaped as Osiride statues of the pharaoh, each carved from the same rock mass as the surrounding chamber. The walls are covered with intricate reliefs depicting battles, rituals, and divine scenes, suggesting that the artists worked within the confined interior spaces, while simultaneously ensuring that the overall geometry of the temple remained intact. Any structural miscalculation could have caused fractures or collapse within the mountain. The technological mystery of Abu Simbel extends even into modern history. During the 20th century, the construction of the Aswan High Dam threatened to submerge the temple beneath the waters of the newly formed reservoir. In an unprecedented international rescue operation led by UNESCO, engineers carefully cut the temple into more than 1,000 stone blocks, each weighing up to 30 tons, and relocated the entire monument to higher ground. When the temple was reassembled, engineers had to preserve the original solar alignment that had been achieved more than 3,000 years earlier. The fact that the ancient orientation could be recreated with such accuracy only reinforced how precisely the original builders had designed the structure. Today, Abu Simbel continues to stand not only as a monument to the ambition of Ramesses II, but also as a reminder that ancient civilizations possessed levels of architectural planning and astronomical understanding that still provoke debate among historians, archaeologists, and engineers. The temple is more than a carved sanctuary. It is a carefully calibrated interaction between architecture, landscape, and the movement of the sun itself. An ancient engineering achievement whose full technical explanation remains partly hidden within the sandstone cliffs of the Nile Valley. Where are you watching this video from? And what time of day is it for you? Share your location and time in the comments below.